this out of the podcast.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
It's totally started already.
People do not need to know about my sniffy nose.
As if you're not going to be sniffing during the podcast. Of course you are.
I don't want to be a grot.
Nah. Be real. Be authentic.
Be
That's what
authentic.
people
Be-
want.
be your
Authenticity.
authentic, snotty self.
Let's just test. I mean, how much do people really want authenticity? They say they want authenticity.
Like, oh, God,
Do they
so
really want it?
authentic. You with your snotty nose.
You with your snotty nose.
God.
Yes. All right, we have 3 cameras rolling. We have a roadcaster recording. We have Carly has left the building. I'm now doing a solo. Good news, everybody. I'm doing a solo podcast. That's my good news for the week. Carly has nicked off, and I get to talk at you for the next 2.5 hours uninterrupted.
Carly's off camera just blowing her nose. Oh, Lord. It's that time of the year where everything triggers you as well.
Yeah, no.
Here.
That's springtime is when that happens.
I'm on. Are you dark? Are you dark enough? You know, that's not what I meant. That's not
So
what I meant.
I'll fix it in post. That's what they say in all the movies. I'll fix it in post.
But you don't.
Well, I kind of do, but the last episode I kind of ran out of time. Took me about 2 days to even get the chance to look at it, so I just kind of rushed it out the door. If I'm honest, that was a bit of a rush job.
Yeah. We could tell.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Doesn't help that the audio got stuffed up.
This should be that actually cost me a lot more time than you would think putting that back together. But this should be the last time we're recording this way.
Excellent.
Next week should be our first time with 3 new cameras and that sexy new Rode videocaster thing doing the edit for us using the audio as its input cue for what edits to do.
You know, I'm sort of at the point with all this technology, I'm just like, it's getting too hard basket for me. I'm like, I'm ready to outsource. Can we do that yet?
Well, no, because we don't have any sponsors, because you haven't picked up the phone, not that we give out a phone number, you haven't picked up your laptop and sent us an email to say, hey, can I throw money at you in order to be promoted on your podcast? Why haven't you done that yet? You should do that.
You should do that. You just make my life so much easier so I don't have to put up with him all the time.
Well, when you say outsource, you're going to outsource me. You're going to just have like Grok sitting here.
No, I'll do an AI version of you, and then I don't actually have to tolerate you in person.
I guess there is enough of my stuff online. You could just be like, Grok, read all this stuff. Now talk to me as though you're this person. It'd probably be pretty spot on.
Do you know what's going to be really freaky is we'll get to a point with AI, like, didn't you actually say that?
Well, this is the thing. We're already there with video, right? Where people, not so much the consumer grade stuff, but if someone really wanted to professionally AI a deep fake that was really convincing, they can do that now.
Yeah.
But it's not very long before that will be able to be done in real time, which means you could sit on a Zoom call.
And you have no idea that.
And you will have a really authentic impression. I mean, they're already doing this with they will mimic someone's voice and get their mum's phone number or something like that, and they will do an AI generated phone call to the mum. Oh, I'm traveling. I'm in trouble. I need money. I need this. I need that. With an authentic voice. I've lost my phone. That's why it hasn't come from my number. Blah blah blah. It won't be long before you can video call that stuff.
Yeah, I heard something the other day. To be honest, I didn't give it a whole lot of attention, but I think some guy went to court and he used an AI lawyer.
Oh yeah.
And the AI lawyer was on the call or something.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I'll have to look into it. But I saw something about it. I was like, I'll come back to that. Do you know what's funny is every time we sit down to do these notes for the show, I'm like, there's so much to talk about. I'm like, I don't even know where to start. Like, there's obviously the obvious things that have happened during the week, but there's all these little things. I'm like, that's interesting. We should talk about that. And then we have a 30-hour podcast.
Yeah, we never have time. Ultimately what this needs to get to is you need to leave Melbourne and live closer to me so that we can catch up every day, have all automated editing, and we can just sit down for like 1 hour every day and just do like the news of the day with Carlz and Topher.
Or you could move back to Melbourne.
No.
Yeah.
No. I see, I have my only real gift that I will lay claim to is that I can understand what's happening in the world sooner than most people. Not sooner than anyone, but sooner than most people. And as I look at the future of Victoria, this is not a place you want to be anytime in the next 40 years.
Oh, God, no. No, we've got plans to leave, but I don't think it'll be staying in Australia for us.
Yeah. And we thought about going overseas. Actually, we were very close to making that decision and then finally found a place where we're like, oh, actually, we like this.
We're looking to see if I qualify for the O1, and I think I do.
Okay.
Yeah, so but
just the $5 million golden visa with Trump. You're just gonna.
I need a couple more dollars to add into that.
Just shake your mattress a bit harder. I mean, it's got to be in there somewhere.
With a face like this, how could they say no?
I know. It's a $5 million face, isn't it? You could just give them that. No,
I'm
hang
just
on,
going
let's
to
not think too
message
much about that.
my mate in El Salvador and be like, hey, I'm ready to move across.
All right. Well, speaking of your mate in El Salvador,
good news.
Sorry.
Don't.
Okay.
I'm leading this podcast.
I'm sorry. All
right,
Please
good
don't
news.
fire me. Please don't replace me with AI.
Good news.
You go first. I had some good news. I can't remember what it was.
Okay, so my good news is it news? I have taught myself over the weekend an entirely new web design platform called Webflow.
Okay.
Now, as a designer, easy peasy. I can make things look good. But as far as like the actual coding to do the cool, tricky stuff,
the functional stuff,
like I understand it, but not enough, if that makes sense. So I'll like do things and it breaks, and I'm like, oh no. But Webflow, for anyone who's actually interested, it's quite an upgrade from, say, like a Squarespace.
Okay.
So you're actually playing with your HTML and your CSS, but you can visualize it as it's doing it. So back in the day, you'd just be looking at the code and you look at the CSS and it'd just be like literally all the little bits and bobs.
It's like word processors back in the day. They weren't WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You had all the various ASCII, I think it was, codes and symbols in there, and you had to interpret what that meant in terms of how that would then print. And then finally they came up with WYSIWYG. You could see what it was actually going to look like on the page.
Which was a massive change for me, because I remember I learnt Dreamweaver back in the day. Is Dreamweaver even around still?
I don't know. I haven't heard about them for ages.
Right. And so that's what I learnt in. It was all, coding here and all that. And because I'm so visual, I never quite got my head around code, because I just get frustrated. I'm like, can't you just move it here? And they're like, oh, no, you need to type in the pixels. Anyway, long story short, Webflow, you can buy some templates and they're pretty amazing. Like, as far as like entry level sort of web design. And they do this little online university. It goes for about 5 hours. And I just sat there and I was like, I'm learning this today. This is happening. And I'm almost done building my own website, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm like...
So can that be hosted on like a WordPress sort of thing, or is it just an entirely separate ecosystem?
Webflow's its own thing.
It is its own thing.
It's its own thing. Yeah. So my current website's on Squarespace, which I can design one of those with my eyes closed.
Yeah.
I wanted something a little bit more fancy. And then I've been building my back end for all my YouTube, so all my automations and...
So we were just talking off camera. I need a new website this year.
Yes.
I've got 3 different websites. I need to pull them all together and
do.
create a members area, because I'm moving in that direction. So should I be talking to you?
Yes, Webflow will do all that. Yeah, and like Shopify...
I can pay you in cheeseburgers.
No. I don't think my landlord accepts cheeseburgers.
And the Zoopers melt too fast. You're right.
Yeah.
I got to rethink this.
Yeah, sorry. But it's actually really cool. And so it's getting to a point now where there's so many when I say entry level, they're just like user-friendly interfaces that regular Joes can jump on, and you can become quite competent.
This is the maturing of any technology though. That we're reaching the like early paper printers. You had to be able to set the margins yourself, and you had to tell it what the thickness of the paper was, and if you got it wrong, it mattered because it would affect how it printed.
What happened when the T-Rex came over and just like knocked all your paperwork like a cat does?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back in the day. Yeah.
I was going to say, back in those prehistoric days.
Back in the prehistoric times, and now you can just feed it paper and it figures it all out for itself.
I am going to refute that. I have never met a printer that doesn't have some sassy attitude.
Okay, it's probably not the best example. I mean, photocopiers are famously sassy. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
All printers are just literally sitting there going.
Okay, but see, I've just assumed that printers, just as a species, are feminine. I just assumed that was the feminine energy. They're all much more complicated than they need to be. They create drama right at the worst possible moment.
Look, you're not wrong.
Yeah,
that's a great analogy. They are the most fickle things. But anyway, this is not what people are here to talk about today, or listen to us talk about. Good news?
All right. So I had a theory that, and I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but I've talked about it with you. I have a theory. There's a car I want to build. It's a kit car. It's very expensive, but very nice. It's a high-end kit car. And there's 2 things I want to accomplish with that. One is to have built it and for the love of doing that. The other is to do it while my son is a teenager, and that becomes that independent activity, because people talk about men and women, and the way we communicate is different. Women will catch up with someone to have a cup of tea and to talk. Let's catch up for a chat. Men, we don't go, hey, let's catch up for a chat. We go, let's go fishing. Let's watch the footy. Let's have a barbecue. At the very least, let's go to the pub. Like, there's got to be this other activity, and then we talk, right? And so I wanted to create something like that for me and my son, particularly when he's in his early teenage years, and that's a pretty formative time. And of course, I'm going, well, I'd love to build this car, and I'd love for that to be the activity that I do with him, but that's kind of contingent on him also loving the idea of doing it and wanting to do it and wanting to spend time with me. So as a bit of a test, I bought the biggest, most complicated Lego car model that I could get, a 3,500 piece Bugatti. And my son and I have been building that bit by bit.
Yeah.
And he loves it, and he keeps coming back to me, begging me, are we going to get to do more of that today? Are we going to have time to do more of that today? So my good news is that I think that my little plan for sometime in the next few years to start building a kit car in my garage with my son, I think it's going to go well.
He's taken it up.
I
He's
think
excited.
I think he's taken the bait.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing to do, though.
Yeah.
Because then you get to have this thing.
Yeah. And my hope is that I'll be able to hang on to that till I die and it becomes his.
Yeah.
And it's a cool looking thing. It looks like a Le Mans prototype racer. It'll have a V8 in it. It'll look and sound...
Is it road legal?
Yeah, completely road legal in Australia. It will look and sound unlike anything else on the road today, let alone fast forward another 30 years, 40 years, to have something like that sitting under a car cover in your garage.
That's very cool.
I will be the cool grandpa. Don't you worry about that.
Can you do me a favour? Can you push that grid down just a touch?
No, you already look better than me. I don't want to make it even worse.
I'm like, the light's above my head. It's not even on me, just down a bit. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, see, I instantly got prettier.
That's a shame.
You know that's how G learnt what he does?
No,
He
I didn't
literally, his neighbour across the road helped him or taught him a little bit about cars, and G just took to it like a fish to water.
Yeah, right.
And he's completely self-taught. He just started when he was like 13.
Yeah.
And slowly
busy.
just learnt stuff, and now he builds race cars. So there you go.
Nice.
Anyway, on to our first segment. I've actually got segments
Not
now.
down to business.
No, we're down to segments.
Oh.
I am an official podcast host.
Wait a minute. Wait. Are we organised?
No.
Oh, good.
God, no.
I was going to say.
God,
Whew, that was a close call.
Don't set the bar too high. We won't be able to maintain it. But we have to start with my favourite thing of the week, which is this space, the Blue Origin all-female space flight.
Oh, my goodness. How good is this?
Have you ever seen a more pretentious...
Okay, there's people that don't know what we're talking about. What are we talking about?
Okay, so for those of you who have been lucky enough
Hiding
to escape...
under a rock. How have you escaped this?
Gayle King, whoever that is, Katy Perry, pop star, a couple of other random chicks, and Jeff Bezos's fiance, Miss Plastic Fantastic, went up in a little bit of a joyride into space, allegedly.
Not quite into space.
And there's...
almost into space.
What I love about this is like no one is impressed. Literally no one. It's like the first time that like the left and the right are like, yes, we hate this equally together. Like this could be the thing that reunites humanity.
Okay, listen. I don't have a problem with them doing this trip. I think it's cool. I would love to see Earth from 100 kilometers up. That would be awesome. I hope to be wealthy enough and for my wealth to increase and for the price to decrease such that they intersect sometime before I die, and I can pay for that. But let's not pretend that only a year ago the left was screaming at Bezos and Musk, etc., for being these billionaire rocket men, people wasting resources and energy and putting CO2 into the atmosphere. And now all of a sudden we've got Katy Perry, who has been on board a lot of those causes over the course of her career.
Oh, she's like Little Miss Progressive. Yeah,
she's benefited greatly from her association with all those causes. The minute she gets the chance to sit in one of these things and have her trip into space, she's on.
So what I love about this is there's so much I want to talk about. I've got some things in front of me, but the first thing I have to talk about is their reaction in the rocket or the little spaceship that they're in.
Yeah.
The way they carried on, like it's so embarrassingly cringe. They're talking about this like all-female space crew.
Yeah.
Firstly, they're not crew; they're a payload.
They are sacks of potatoes. They have as much involvement in flying that as the early, like the chimpanzees and stuff that were the early payloads put into space. They had a similar level of skill and involvement.
Like literally how insulting to the astronauts who spend their entire careers learning like space engineering and literal rocket science.
Yeah.
And then a fucking pop star gets up in a little capsule and she's like, I'm an astronaut. You're not, dull. But anyway, bless your cotton socks. But what I love about this is the way this sanctimonious wankery, the way they performed. Like, Katy Perry is a bloody actress, pop star.
Yeah.
The whole thing, like Oprah, right? Oprah was watching her friend Gayle King go up. And as soon as the camera pans over to Oprah, she realized, and she's like, oh, this is my moment. Pulls the side. Oh, God. Oh. Like, it's just so disingenuous. And you're sitting there going, hang on a minute. These people are all like billionaires or at least, like hundreds of millions rich.
They're in the 0.01%.
Right.
Yeah.
the way they're carrying on as if this was literally the very first spacewalk. Like these were women pioneering something. They were just literally space tourists. Nothing. I would go to space. Like if it was offered to me, I would go.
Yeah.
But the way they carry on and then they come down and they see this reaction. I want to talk about the left's reaction because you've got people like the likes of Amy Schumer and Em Rada or Emily Ratajkowski and Olivia Wilde who are all criticising this.
Which is kind of, for me, it's almost like who, but I have kind of heard those names.
Well, they're wokies. They're Hollywood wokies.
Now, can I just say though, let's be fair. The fact that they are recognising the nonsense of this and criticising it actually speaks better of them than if they didn't.
Yeah, I agree. They called it gluttonous, which I think is exactly the right word. So apparently...
From their worldview.
Yeah, so
that's the right expression, yeah.
Yeah, one seat was auctioned for $28 million. So, like, this isn't a small investment.
I'll have to buy that next week, sorry.
Yeah, you just need a couple more dollars.
Yeah.
And a typical deposit is $150,000. But, like, I just think it...
Do they accept payment in children?
Sure. Well, that's Hollywood.
That's currency in Hollywood.
What's it called? Adrenochrome?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, cool.
Just line up your kids.
I should be right then.
Yeah, you've got 3.
I got 3. Yeah.
It'll get you at least.
I mean, I've got a boy, a girl, and a spare. So
perfect, and that can just go either way depending on whose proclivities.
You know, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realise that I was heteronormalising my own children.
Yeah. You can get in big trouble for this.
I'm so sorry.
But, okay, so this space mission, right, like what they were doing, they talked about their training. What training was involved?
Okay, hang on. The G-forces they go through are still pretty significant. You would have to go through physicals and you'd be doing some physical prep. And in defence of someone like a Katy Perry, we can criticise them. They're just little pop stars and dancing around the stage. Actually, they have to be pretty fit, even just to do that at a basic level. Then you get your exceptional ones like Pink, who are just athletes, like phenomenal. Now, she wasn't on the flight, but let's give credit where it's due. It would have taken us a base level of physical fitness, a base level of courage.
Yeah, I think, I'll give them that.
There's a lot of people that would have just been like, I like the idea, but ain't no way.
Yeah.
So give them that. And it would be exciting. It would be a thrilling thing to do. I would like to do that.
Look, I agree. And if it was just that, they're like, hey, we're really excited. We're going to go up in this, like, mini space flight and just have a look around.
Yeah,
and
without the drama.
Without the drama, kissing the ground when you get off. Like, we just had 2 astronauts stuck in space for 9 months? 9
months, yeah.
And the Biden administration couldn't go and get them. And then Elon Musk goes up there and rescues them from the International Space Station and the media silent. Yeah, gets criticised for it. Yeah. But we can send a pop star and, I don't know who the other people are, so I don't know what to call them. I don't know. Is Gayle King a TV host or something? I have no idea.
Don't know.
And, Bezos is in there, though. I will say I think they call her a civil rights activist. She was someone who did work for NASA. I just want to make sure I'm on the record with this. She worked for NASA and she was, I believe, sexually assaulted or I don't know if I can say the R word on Instagram.
Okay.
YouTube, graped.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
at NASA? Like, what's the relationship?
I'm not sure if it happened. She was working at NASA and she was training to be an astronaut. And I don't know I didn't look into the story that much.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she put that on hold and then went to change. So this was what about. The DNA evidence apparently gets thrown out after 12 months if it's not like used for the criminal prosecution.
Okay.
So she was arguing to have that changed in law, and so she petitioned, and it did get changed, so that DNA evidence is kept indefinitely, I believe. Okay. Don't quote me on that, but that was basically the context. So she's Vietnamese, and she eventually went up, right? So she's become an astronaut, arguably.
She got into space, almost,
So credit to her, but I mean, like, we don't know about her because all we know about is Katy Perry and Lauren Sanchez and Gayle King. So I can't speak to the other women because they've had no airtime. But so essentially, I needed. So G, he is literally obsessed with SpaceX and Elon Musk. And he's given me stuff that I need to read out so I sound smart. But I'm not going to sound confident saying this to camera. So So it was an 11-minute mission, right? Mm-hmm. They flew up to 346,802 feet. Technically, they did cross the Kármán line, which is 62 miles, or I think it's 100 kilometres.
Basically 100 kilometres,
and that's what they call, like, the perimeter of space.
Yeah. And essentially, my understanding is they picked that because 100 is a nice round number in kilometres. But it's essentially reaching the altitude above the Earth where the air pressure is so low that your blood will instantly boil.
Yeah.
So the boiling point of any liquid drops as the pressure applied to that liquid drops. And if you step outside of a spaceship at that altitude, your blood just boils.
this is what G explained to me, and I'm going to pretend I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But there's a thing called orbital velocity. So you can't reach that going directly straight. There's just not enough significant force to get you out to space that way.
That's for low Earth orbit. If you're going to do a geostationary orbit, which is much further away, then yes, you can blast your way straight out to that.
Yeah.
To that, and if you manage to stop at that distance, then okay, yeah, in theory, and then accelerate around to just matching the Earth's speed. But yes, if you want to be in any kind of low Earth orbit, then you need a lot of speed.
Yeah, so you got to go up and you got to do orbital to reach orbital velocity, which I think is 25, Mach 25.
It depends on what altitude you're trying to orbit at, but yeah, it's fast.
But these guys were traveling at Mach 3.
Yeah,
and essentially they didn't actually reach zero gravity. They were just in free fall. So they got to, I have to read this because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's very evident. So they didn't go weightless because of zero gravity. They hit the apogee, which is the highest point of the ballistic trajectory. So they're just literally free falling.
Technically, that's true for the I'm sorry to be a pain, but technically that's true for the space station as well. Technically, they're not in zero gravity. They are being kept in orbit by Earth's gravity. It's just that they're falling. Their apogee, they're kind of at the apogee of a fall back to Earth, which once you add their horizontal velocity means they fall around the Earth, if that makes sense.
Right, okay. This is all psychobabble to me.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically when they talk about being an astronaut, you're not technically an astronaut. And so Gayle King, the reason this matters is they're saying this is an all-female space crew. They're astronauts. It's amazing. This is amazing feminism because, of course, it's got to be performative, right? But it's not. And they're like, so Gayle King has come out and saying, how dare we minimize this and say it's a ride. We had a space ride. It was a mission. I'm like, it literally wasn't. You did nothing. It was a ride.
It was a ride. Yep.
And she's arguing that she's no different to someone who's walked on the moon, which is just like, it's...
Yeah, you are different to someone who's walked on the moon.
And it was the very first space mission as well.
11
like,
minutes
as Alan
isn't the
Shepard.
same as like 8 days or whatever it was, whatever it used to take them to get out there and back.
Yeah. And so she's come out basically saying like, how dare people take away from this amazing thing. So yeah, so she's Gayle King, here you go. She's compared herself to Alan Shepard's 1961 suborbital flight. And I believe he walked on the moon. And she's defending calling herself an astronaut because she's saying that, we did the thing. But you didn't. You didn't. And this is what annoys me about the left is they celebrate mediocrity and they take things that are far less significant and talk about them as if they are truly significant.
You know what? I have ridden in the back of an aeroplane, which means I am practically the Wright brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, I may as well be Amelia Earhart because I looked out the window of an aeroplane and I saw the ground and I figured out where I was. And she was a fabulous navigator, so I must be Amelia Earhart.
By proxy. And all it does is minimize the true achievements. But if you want to go down in history as someone who is either an inventor or an innovator or a disruptor, by all means, and we'll give you the congratulations that you deserve.
Innovate, disrupt.
But just trying to claim it by proxy is just
This is participation
insufferable.
trophies at a grown-up level. This is in intergalactic participation trophies.
And it's just so evident to me that this is what I was saying to G last night. It's like, clearly this was a PR stunt. I was like, but what PR did they get out of this? Okay, we're talking about them. I get that. But it just makes Jeff Bezos look like a billionaire moron. It makes the women look like a pack of ridiculous women who are just giggling and gaggling and, carrying on and making it all this drama.
You know who the big winner out of this is? It's Elon Musk.
But yeah, well, they'll never admit that. I believe that.
Yeah.
But this whole PR thing, I don't understand what the intention was because what it's done is basically made all the people who are on the left looking at, eat the rich, just going, this is gluttonous and, this is, there's people starving. And they were talking about, the typical thing is like, you could have taken those millions and fed all these starving people. And it's like, because that's how this works in the world.
Yeah, because that's how this works. But, we talk about this often. The left, people say the left don't have any standards, and that's such a lie. The left have twice as many standards as you and I because all of them are double.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing is just, I find it hilarious. I mean, like I said, if I was offered that, I would absolutely go.
I would.
And I'd be so excited.
And I wouldn't try and use it as a grandstanding platform. Correct. I would go and enjoy the spectacle of seeing my home planet as the rock in space that it is.
Yeah, and the other thing that came out is Megyn Kelly is absolutely going for the jugular with Katy Perry and just talking about her word salad and talking about how she felt love and it connected her to the divine feminine and that, she hopes that by seeing that and the unity that they represented, it can bring everyone back into this place of love. And I've got to ask you, the people out there watching this, are you sick of this performative nonsense yet? Like your intelligence just being constantly insulted by these people who could not be more out of touch with reality.
This is the ivory tower, and they become so deeply concerned with their own little universes. And this is human nature. I'm going to defend it again. I'm going to damn it with faint praise. Human beings adapt to our environment. And so whatever is the worst thing you experience is the worst thing that you've ever experienced. And for someone who grows up in a war-torn country in Central Africa, that's going to be very different to someone who grows up in a leafy, affluent suburb of Melbourne. But there is a certain degree to which for them they're going to experience that as, well, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I'm devastated because such and such, who I thought was my friend, was actually talking about me behind my back. And if that's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, it's going to, they're going to be emotionally devastated. Obviously not traumatized in the same way that someone growing up in a war zone. I'm not saying they're actually relative. I'm saying that because we don't have a universal frame of reference to recognize that the worst thing that's ever happened to me is actually still among the best things in the world, because it means I have friends and people that talk to me and all the rest of it. So for someone who lives that life, like a Katy Perry life now, where everything around them is being done for them, because they're essentially the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yeah.
And I'm going to defend this as well. This is real. Someone like a Katy Perry, they need, and she needs, to optimize her time into doing the things that can only be done by Katy Perry, because that's what people are paying for. That's what people want. That means producing content or preparing for shows or doing shows or what have you, and then just living as a human being and protecting her as Katy Perry so that she can go back to doing the Katy Perry things that only Katy Perry can do. That means that it makes perfect sense to pay someone else to clean her toilet. Because only Katy Perry isn't necessary to clean her toilet, right? Someone else can do that. Someone else can cook her meals. Someone else can drive her car. Someone else can do all these things. And what you end up with is a situation or a world where this person becomes incredibly cloistered, incredibly protected from the realities of the world around them. And that makes perfect economic sense. And it's something that honestly, I'd be very happy to have enough money to do that for myself. Thank you very much. But it does then lead to these people who the worst thing that happens to them in a day is that they chip a nail.
Yeah.
And that then becomes where we end up in a situation like this.
And look, I think the worst thing that ever happened to celebrity culture was literally social media.
Yeah, because they can show how vacuous they are.
Correct. And when they were behind that sort of veil, that thin veil, and
the publicists and promoters and
you would sit there and go, wow, this
person's really got it together,
they're
don't they?
Amazing. What a bastion of morality. And now you see them and you're like, wow, you're a hot mess. But back on that with what's going on at the moment, what you were saying was before, it's a zero-sum game, because if you can't talk about something because someone else in the world is doing it worse than you, then it means that no one has problems, right? Because, I was talking about on my Instagram the other day, I saw a really good YouTube, and this is the first tangent of the podcast.
Ooh.
But it just popped up in my feed. It was this guy.
Tangent time. We need a tangent dance, like a tangent time, tangent time. That's not a song.
No, I don't. Yeah.
Can we not just start hitting random buttons on the thing?
I need to come up with something.
All right, another time. We don't have a thing yet.
No.
We need to program the thing into the thing so that you can thing and it'll thing.
Yeah, I'll do a thing. Yeah. But yeah, whatever. I just like pressing buttons.
Tangent time.
Tangent time. So this random guy's YouTube video popped up in my feed and I watched it. He goes, I'm sick of just surviving. And essentially, I'll summarize it. He's just a middle class dude who earns, like good-ish money, but his good-ish money doesn't get him anything. He made the point that he's on above median salary but can't afford a median house. He's talking about how he can't make any further savings on his utilities aside from just not using them at all. And he's had people say, well, just use solar. He's like, well, I can't. I rent.
I don't have the money to pay the upfront on that.
And all these things, he's like, every time I go to the groceries, there's nothing left. He's like, I can't live like this. Every day it feels like the walls are coming in on me. And, he goes on to talk more about his, how he's feeling. And essentially what I felt like he did is he spoke for the middle class, who right now are feeling like everything that they've had is being eroded. I feel like that. You feel like that. G-Look feels like that. It's getting to a point where you're like, hang on a minute, I'm working harder than I ever had. I'm earning more than I ever have, but I have less than I've ever had. This makes no sense. And every week I'm starting to feel more and more squeezed. And it was just a really good YouTube video. And then I went and read the comments. And of course you've got, people both sides of the fence. And those who are arguing against his point of view are literally saying, like, how could you possibly argue that you're doing it tough right now? There's people who are homeless. There's people who are living in some sexual or domestic abuse relationships. Like, you know, the list goes on. I'm like, hang on a minute. How have we gotten to this point where those of us who, you know, arguably living a little bit more privileged than some can't have genuine issues that we're allowed to talk about? Because you over there, someone who's completely detached from our life that we don't know, has arguably worse problems. You know,
it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's a meaningless point. As soon as someone resorts to that, you've got to, you know, if someone is sitting there whinging and not doing anything about their problems, well, then I think that point starts to become valid. But if someone is doing everything that they can do, then saying, oh, well, someone else is doing it tougher than you, I think is just an incredibly unfair. It's a cheap way to try and win an argument rather than actually accomplish anything in life. But the point that they're making is very, very real, that and this is the warning that I keep giving, and I've been giving now since 2015, and I got laughed at when I started making this point. We are in the same funnel, the same spiral that leads down to where Venezuela is. And people go, oh, that's ridiculous. You can't compare Australia with Venezuela. Well, I just did, and I can because, as I said before, one of the few things that I will lay claim to is that I'm able to look at the world, put the pieces together, and see where we're going further in advance than the majority of people can. And we are in that funnel right now. And if you look at the promises being made in this election campaign that's happening right now, they're all about quotas, price controls, more government spending. The government's going to save you. It's going to fix things for you. And these are literally, when I came back in 2015 from Venezuela, I said, here are your hallmarks. Here are the metrics that you look for to see whether things are getting better or worse. If things are getting worse, you will see an increase in price controls. You will see an increase in quotas. You will see an increase in government ownership of things, and you will see ultimately capital controls, which is where once everything starts collapsing, they try and stop people from getting out with their money. We are beginning to see all of these things creeping in different forms in Australia, particularly around housing. That's the big one this election. De facto house pricing controls. They're now bringing in rent controls, promising only one rent increase per annum, blah, 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 more and more rules around landlords. We are seeing the creeping growth of price controls, quotas, etc., creeping in. We are in deep, deep, deep trouble. The problem is that our perception of ourselves is going to lag about 20 years behind the reality of where we're at. So I'm looking at where we're going to be in 20 years, recognizing where we are right now. Other people think we're still where we were 20 years ago. And that's why they go, well, you're in fantasy land. You can't see it. No. I can see exactly where we are right now, and I can see exactly where we'll be in 20 years, and that's why I'm out of Victoria, and that's why I'm very willing to get my family out of Australia. I'm not going down with this ship. Now, I'm not convinced the ship's going down yet. I'll wait until I'm convinced the ship's going down, but believe me, I will not still be here if it goes down.
There's a few things here, and this is probably a good tangent to be on, but essentially what I've been seeing is like a lot of uptake in socialism policies that seem to be appealing to these young people, because these kids have been raised on doomsday porn. Climate change, the end of the world, Armageddon, they'll never be able to buy a house, the world's against you, you're oppressed, you're a victim, you've got ADHD, all the isms. And what you're seeing is these guys, the solution is the government steps in, because someone needs to be the adult.
Again, generalising, we've talked before about the split that's happening in that generation, where there are definitely people going in that direction, but there are lots of other people that are actually going the other way and saying, I'm going to get a trade, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to do what I can to make the most out of my life. There is a divide happening there. But you're right in the sense of the fear porn and the despair and the sense of manufactured helplessness that is coming in. You know, people complain about weaponized incompetence or weaponized helplessness, etc. And particularly, of course, it's aimed at husbands who can't do things, so their wives have to do everything for them, blah, blah, blah. Well, no. Weaponized incompetence is actually, it teams up with the tyranny of low expectations, where the government comes in and says, you can't do that for yourself. You're in a position of helplessness and despair. You need us to come and do that for you. And they engineer incompetence and helplessness into the population so that they can say, we will save you. I literally wrote that in the car on the way down here today. I was writing a script for a video that I'm hoping to film tomorrow morning, which is literally all about the fact that The governments do not like to solve problems. They like to promise to solve problems.
Yeah.
Because nothing wins them votes faster or cheaper than promising they'll spend your money on fixing your problems. But if they actually fix the problem, it's like a drug company. If you heal somebody with your drugs, you've lost a customer. If you actually fix that problem, you've lost a voter. What you need is for that problem to persist so that you can come back to them next time and say, we did everything we could, but you know what? We've got to do more.
Yeah, we need your vote to help us.
We need your vote to help us. They're going to undo all those wonderful things that we did for you last time, which is the only reason things aren't even worse. And the more pain you're in, the more susceptible you are to that kind of line.
Well, I think I said this to you before we started filming. I've been driving around this morning. I've been looking at some of these political billboards, and it doesn't matter if it's Greens, Labor, Liberal, or anyone else. The Clive Palmer ones, I just can't even look at. I'm just like, how insufferable. But the Labor ones, right, are particularly like they're just like it's doomsday porn. Like Labor will save you essentially, or if you don't vote us back in, this is the end of the country. As a voter, or as an American citizen,
wow,
as an Australian citizen,
wow,
that was
anything
a Freudian
we
slip.
need to know about? Wow,
Adopt me.
She's already emotionally checked out. She's gone.
I'm done.
Yeah,
I've never felt truly Australian though.
well, I mean, you spent so long in Japan as a kid, and you've travelled so much.
Yeah,
It's
I
kind of
don't
understandable.
identify with the culture at all, but or the lack of. But where was I going with this?
Hey, fully sick donuts down at the Woolies car park.
No, I'm talking about the footy netball culture. When I moved to Australia, it was just footy netball, and I was like, can't relate. But I
tried netball. Don't look good in a dress.
It's just a dumb sport, sorry. But the billboards, right? Like as an Australian voter or just an Australian in general, are you not insulted by the way that our politicians treat us? They treat you like you're a child, that you can't decipher for yourself what is fact or fiction. You know, free this, free that. We'll solve this by us doing this. For example, in Victoria, you're seeing all the Victorian Labor MPs coming out, obviously endorsing Albanese, campaigning on his behalf for the federal election. These people have had the balance of power in their favour for almost 2 decades. The state of Victoria is in freefall decline. And they'll gaslight you and say, only we are able to fix it. Knowing full well, as a Victorian, reading these billboards, you'll go, hang on a minute, I am in the worst I've ever been. My state is in decline, but you guys are telling us, even though you've had the power for 2 decades, you need more power because you'll be able to fix the mess you made.
Okay, the only way that you can have your intelligence insulted is if you have some in the first place. And that's why the average voter's intelligence is not being insulted right now, is because they're not actually applying any of their great stuff to any of these topics. Take the word free. You've triggered me now. We agreed we were going to have a less than 2 hour podcast. Well, I'm going to go on a more than 2 hour rant on the word free because there is legislation around truth in advertising. Now, I think we should have absolute free speech. I think we need to be very careful about any regulations, no matter how well intended, that govern people's speech. But I do think that governing the speech of the government is a different thing. Putting rules around what a government employee can say on behalf of the government, I think, is a different thing to the government putting restrictions on what the people can say. No one in government should be allowed to lie by calling something free when all they're doing is making someone else pay.
Yeah.
And to have billboards up all over the place, and he's not being called out, Anthony Albanese, we'll make this free, we'll make that free, we'll keep this free, we'll protect that and make sure it's free for future generations. None of that's free. All of that is, in fact, why we're in so much debt, why the national credit card is completely maxed out, and why our money is becoming so worthless so quickly is because we're giving away all of this free stuff, which comes at a terrible, terrible price.
Can I tell you something that's going to really make you mad?
What, you want to make me madder? I'm really, because I don't want to blow people's ears up.
Like,
The microphone is right here. I don't want to hurt people, okay?
I can see the steam rising off your body.
And I'm having to contain it because the microphone is right here.
This will make you absolutely enraged. And you guys as taxpayers, because you need to know about this. Now, we know the NDIS is a massive scam, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to give you an exact example. So Gareth's mum lives up in Cairns and there's a lot of crime up there, a lot of youth crime.
Yep.
And there is a government-run program, I think through either St. John or something like that. I don't know you guys will have to go look at the particulars. But essentially it's a state government program where seniors are eligible for up to $10,000 of security things to do to their home, mostly around cameras.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So up to 10,000. So Gareth's mum's next door neighbour was broken into twice by youths. And so they were eligible for this program and they got $10,000 worth of cameras. Now, as someone who has literally just installed cameras in her house, I know exactly how much these cost, right? It's not $10,000, even if you get the electrician. So the next door neighbour, I think, had a couple of cameras and then the monitor and the recording and all that sort of stuff, 10 grand. And so the neighbour referred Gareth's mum to the same company and the same scheme, and she's applied for it. And the same thing, you get 10 grand. So she asked for 6 cameras and a monitor that would show up the 6 cameras and record everything. Now, you can only get the monitor that does 4 cameras or 8 cameras. Okay. So, 6 cameras and then an 8-way monitor to record and 3 terabyte hard drive to record all the data. Yeah. Now, the subcontractor who's going for the government thing, he comes and says, oh, that's like 12 grand. And she goes, oh, it needs to be under 10. He goes, all right, I'll work the numbers for you. So it's going to be $9,800. And you're going to get 5 cameras and the monitor. Right? So he drops it down. Yeah. Anyway, it comes around to installation. The young guy comes and installs, drills the holes for the 5 cameras, and then realizes that the quote actually only says 4 cameras. And instead of the 8-way monitor, it's the 4-way monitor. And Gareth's mum's like, hang a minute. We said 5 because I asked you just to take 1 camera off. And he goes, and then the guy who runs the company goes, well, we can't do that because I had to get the price under for you. So I've taken 2 cameras off. And not only has he taken 2 cameras off, he's dropped the monitor down to 4 and the hard drive storage down to 2 terabytes. Yeah. Anyway, Gareth's like, none of this is adding up, Mum. Send me the stuff. So he jumps online and has a look at the cost of all these things that are on this invoice. Yeah. The cost of the actual products themselves, the hardware, the cameras, the monitor, and like let's say some labor, like $2,500 tops. Right? Throw in an extra 1,000 each way. 10 grand is what this guy is charging the government. So all of that is going in his pocket, right? And so you guys will be like, oh, that's smart business. He's making profit. Who do you think's paying that 10 grand bill to that tradie who is rorting the system? We are. The taxpayer. Yeah. Now, that's one example or 2 examples, right? So the next door neighbour and Gareth's mum. So that's 20 grand that's going to this government subcontractor because he's part of the scheme. Yeah. Now, of that, the cost of goods and his labour, because you deserve to be paid, is under like 4 grand.
Yeah, let's call it 4.
Right? Yep. So he's making $5.5 grand profit per job. It's like a 2-hour job. Okay.
So there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. So what matters in an economy is not the amount of money that changes hands, it's the amount that you get in return. And what we're doing in every government scheme, and again, you're reading my mind, I was writing this into my script that I was working on in the car on the way down here. Every single time the government gets involved in something, you end up having to spend more money to get less. They kill productivity. And this is a perfect example. Now, his reply, because I know people who run companies that deal with government programs, etc., his reply will be, but you don't understand how much money and time and staff hours I have to put in order to qualify as a government-approved installer, in order to be on their system, in order to be eligible for these things. And this is actually true, right? Becoming one of those companies is a specialty in its own right. You have to probably hire consultants who will fill out all the forms and charge you tens of thousands of dollars for the privilege just to be able to get into these boondoggles, these schemes. But this is consistently what happens. Think about pink bats. Think about the Cash for Clunkers program. Before that, when John Howard was in his last term, he had a program that I actually became a teacher under one of his last programs, which was about retraining people, mature age adults, in computer skills so that they could get back into the workforce. If they lost their previous job driving a forklift or whatever it might have been, they can get the basic computer skills they need to be able to get a new job. And I taught and I made good money. I made bank. But the companies that were running, the registered training organizations that were running that, they were making squillions of dollars, but really the art was not in the teaching of the students. The art was in the qualifying for the government program. And one of the definitions, one of the distinctions between a capitalist system and a corporatist system, which is halfway to fascism. A capitalist system, you make money by keeping your customers happy. In a corporatist system, you make money by keeping the government happy. And all of these programs, as we're adding more and more and stacking them more and more on top of each other, we are moving further and further away from an efficient market-driven system that says, well, you can have $4,000 worth of cameras and installation for $4,000 to an inefficient government-run system that says you can get $10,000 to install 4 cameras and the monitor. And the rest of that is going to be either profit to someone who doesn't deserve it, because in a competitive market, they would never have made that money, or it's going to get lost in the churn of the consultants and the time that you have to spend keeping the government happy.
Yeah.
But it's lucrative, so people do it. We are a lot further down this rabbit hole than people realize we are.
I think, you need to give people those exact examples so that people can see it tangibly, because it's all well and good to talk about things up here at the superficial level. You need explicit examples. So what you're seeing now, and so I haven't talked about this on camera yet, but in Victoria, we have a victims of crime financial scheme, right? So if you're a victim of an aggravated crime or a violent crime, they call it, you can qualify for this. And we were told to go through that to get our cameras. I need to tell you how bad this program is. So, I've lost almost 25 grand worth of stuff in these, Gareth's car got stolen, right? Yeah. Across the 2 break-ins. The second one, I didn't qualify for anything because it's not violent, because I wasn't present.
You weren't personally there, yeah.
Yeah, but it was aggravated burglary because we were in the house. Anyway, so the cop told us about this scheme. And he's like, if you go through this, they'll pay for your cameras and stuff. So we applied, and this happened in November. It has it's what are we, April, halfway through April. It's still not
6
approved.
months. Yeah, wow.
It's like, and they make it so hard, so arduous, right? We've supplied everything they asked for. And at this point, I'm like, we'll just pay for it ourselves. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, correct.
This is ridiculous.
Correct. But this is true of everything. Think about the people that had reason to believe that they'd been vaccine injured with the COVID jabs. And accessing the VAERS system, Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, is notoriously arduous. Doctors don't want to do it. So even doctors that are looking at someone going, yeah, I think that probably was the vaccine, are then saying to them, no, I don't, I'm not going to spend the time to put it through the system because it's so freaking hard.
Yeah.
And there's no point, because nothing ever gets done with this data. So government systems. So not only are we spending too much, we're spending more to get less of a result, as you illustrated with the cameras there, but also we're spending enormous amounts of unproductive time to get no real results at all, just with the compliance. Being unemployed is a full-time job now.
Yeah.
Keeping up with Centrelink and doing your appearances and this and that. There are people who are literally spending their lives finding and going to, or not going to, as the case may be, job interviews so that they can tick the box that allows them to get their next Centrelink check. You can spend your entire life busy, full-time employed, keeping the government happy so you can get the welfare, or you can get whatever little program it is. Just get the government out.
Yeah. Let's talk about tertiary education. So obviously Adam Bant, the head of the Greens, he's come out saying that the Greens are going to try and campaign for free tertiary education.
Yes, free. That word,
right? And this infuriates me. Now, I'm obviously doing my master's and I'm paying a pretty penny for it. So if Albanese gets in, he's promised me that he'll take 20% off my HECS, right?
Isn't that nice of him? But strangely, my cost of living is just keeping on going up. I wonder if those two things are related.
And this is the problem that people fall for, because if you have a HECS, like mine's going to be about 50 grand, you go, oh, wow, 20% discount. That's nice. But all that means is I'm paying it back in another indirect way.
You're going to end up paying most of that back through inflation. Yeah. That's how it will show up in the economy.
You'll be paying for my
All
masters.
of us will be paying for it through inflation.
And they make a really good point. The Greens want free education so they can indoctrinate more people through the universities. But I'm sorry, why would I need to pay for your arts degree?
So this is hilarious to me, because it's one of the most regressive ideas ever. We will make all taxpayers, including the people that haven't gone to university, pay for the educations of the people that can afford to spend 4 years going to university. Not everyone has the luxury. That is a luxury choice, to spend 4 years putting yourself through university. Even if the university is free, that 4 years is worth a lot of money, and a lot of people can't afford that. They're working, and they're going to keep working. They've already got a job as a receptionist, or they're doing a trade, or whatever it may be. So firstly, this is deeply regressive. We're making poor people pay for the educations of, relatively speaking, richer people than them. But secondly, the marginal utility argument. Now, I think I've covered this before in the podcast, but it bears repeating. I need to touch on this again. Education is valuable. That's a fact. We can measure. We can say more educated people earn more than less educated people do. But it's not always equal. If you have a city of 3 million people and no doctors, that first doctor that you educate is worth a freaking truckload of money. If you've got 2,999,999 doctors in your 3 million person city, educating that 3 millionth person to also become a doctor doesn't just have no value, it has negative value, because you've poured resources into something that will provide no marginal utility. So there comes a tipping point, there comes a balancing point where in any given society, based on what we need in that society, the cost of educating another person to do job X is greater than what they're worth in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Now, how do we figure that out? How does a government decide how many of this type of degree and how many of that type of degree and how many trades we need? The answer is they shouldn't be trying to figure that out at all. That is something that the market naturally figures out. In the same way that the market figures out how many cars we need at a time. You know why? Because if we have too many, they sit there unsold. And if we have too few, the value goes up. And so the dealers have an incentive to find a way to bring some more in. The market sorts it out. When the government comes in and says, well, we're going to make it free. Well, number one, they've removed all the market pricing signals. How do you know what something's worth if no one is actually directly paying for it? If you don't have to make that value cost to benefit ratio decision for yourself, there is no one person making any kind of a pricing signal assessment on that. So we don't even know what an education's worth anymore because no one's paying for their own education anymore. Secondly, we don't have the outcome in mind. Is this person going to get a job? I did a video on this recently. There are roughly 1,000 jobs available for someone with a marine science degree in Australia. Which means, assuming about a 20-year career, because that's a pretty specialised thing, people that do it are going to stay in it, right? So let's assume people stay in it for 20 years. That means we need 50 new graduates every single year coming out of our universities. Instead, we have hundreds every year coming out of our universities with marine science degrees, and then hundreds more the following year and hundreds more the following year. Why? Well, because telling your mates that you're doing marine science sounds pretty sexy. If you're a bloke, that's going to get you laid for sure. All right? So you want to be seen to be the guy doing the marine science degree. You're not thinking yet about whether you can get a job in that. The universities have no connection to the real world. There doesn't have to be any real world outcome for you. They get paid by the government to give you the education, whether it's useful or not. And so you've got all these perverse incentives and all of them go away the minute that person has to pay for their own education and actually decide, is this worth it or not? We need the price signals back in education.
I agree. And I'll give you an example of what's happening with my master's at the moment. Like, not to shit on the place I'm doing it. Like, I'm doing it for my own reasons. But as far as, like, you know, every week we have different artists come in and speak to us, or different people in the industry and come speak to us. And I listen to them and I look at their work. And again, art is very subjective. Whether or not I like it or not is irrelevant. But my question at the end of every single presentation is, how do you live off this? And the answer is they don't. So all of these people who get the accolades from the arts industry, like, you're amazing, you're so proud, this is truly like performative and just like, wow, you know, you're blowing my mind. They're broke, right?
But that's also a badge of honour. It
is. But my point is this, right? And there is something in that, and I know that for a lot of artists, a lot of their creativity comes from pain, and pain is caused by suffering, and suffering is good, but all that sort of stuff. I understand all that. My point is, though, but what point do universities become liable for these adults they're putting out into the world who cannot support themselves? They've been held up and they've been celebrated for being, you know, these innovative thinkers, but they're actually adding no value to the market. So the university is losing its value in itself, because even though they've got all the accolades and they've got all the letters after their name, they're unemployable. They haven't actually learned a skill as such, because university doesn't actually teach you the skill. They teach you how to think.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, supposedly. Yeah. That's what the brochure says.
Right. And so you've got, and every time one of these people come in, they're like, oh, they've won this prize and they've won that prize and they've exhibited here. And I'm like, and this is my standard, like my litmus test for these people. I'm like, has anyone bought your art?
Yeah.
And if they have, is it paying your bills? And most times the answer would be no.
But that's considered to be quite a vulgar way to look at it within that artistic world. You can't.
This is why I'm not accepted.
You can't put a price on these things, Carly.
Well, but you can, though.
You must. And so someone like myself, I sit there and I look at my work. I've been a political commentator for 16 years and I've had to do other jobs the whole way through to pay my bills.
Yeah.
And I accept that what that tells me is that what I'm doing is not actually valuable enough out in the real world for it to be my full-time job. Now, earlier this year, I made the decision, I want this to be my full-time job. So I don't go and whinge about how no one appreciates my work, blah, blah, blah. I go, well, how do I have to show up in the world for people to see enough value that I can make enough money to make this my full-time job? It's my responsibility to figure out how to take my art, which is a communications art, and package it in such a way that people see the value that
Yes.
I believe is there. I can talk, oh, but my work, you don't understand how insightful I am. Well, that doesn't matter if no one else can see it either,
Yeah.
right? I have a responsibility to package myself in such a way that people see the value and I can therefore earn a living. And by the way, 3 months in, it's going reasonably well.
Yeah.
I am now actually above the median full-time Australian salary doing what I do.
Yeah.
Right now, that's a
But
fantastic result.
That's something I always say is the market sorts you out. You can
Correct.
sit there and say I'm this incredible like disruptive thinker or artist, but if there's no market viability and there's no evidence of that, you're just a self-proclaimed wanker as far as I see.
Yes.
And so, you know, I really oddly stand out in my school because I have a real commercial brain.
Yeah.
And so we have to get a mentor, right? So I've had to go out and I've literally emailed 27 well-established fashion photographers in Melbourne and Sydney, like people who have actual careers, right?
Yeah.
And of that 27, how many do you reckon email me back?
Actually replied. I'm gonna be optimistic and say 3.
1.
Okay.
1. Who do you think that person was? Like, give me some just...
I don't know who's in your
No,
industry.
the generic. Who do you think may have replied? What kind of person?
Okay, I'm imagining it would be a relatively hard-headed, quite busy, commercially successful photographer.
And it's a male.
Right.
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 So the only person that replied is a 64-year-old, very established, very well-known male fashion photographer, and he lives in Melbourne. And he has a studio outside in the burbs. And he was the only one that gave me the time of day, and he rang me. Right. And
okay.
I don't know this guy from a bar of soap. I'm not going to say who it is.
I'm sure if you put him in a bar of soap up there and said pick the person, I'm pretty sure you'd figure it out. Just
But
saying.
yeah, I don't like I'm talking about people if I haven't asked for their permission to talk about them. But anyway, so he rang me and he's like, look, I will mentor you, but I need to ask you a couple of questions. And I was like, I'm listening, right? What do you know? And he's like, if you're the person that needs me to say your pronouns, that needs me to give you a safe space, that will cry if I critique your artwork, I'm not the mentor for you. If you want me to tell you that you're amazing and that you're doing amazing work, I'm not the mentor for you.
I like this guy already.
If you can't be here on time and work a full day without whinging and needing a break, I'm not the mentor for you.
Good Lord, a bloke has never given me the need for a cold shower before, but I think this guy's getting close.
And he said a couple other things, and I was just like elated. I was like, pick me, please. Like that was my pick me moment because I was like, oh my God, like this is what I want. And I said to him, like, I'm desperate for someone to rip me apart in all the right ways. Like pull everything apart and so I can put it back together.
Yeah.
I'm sick of being told like, oh, that's great. You're doing amazing. Bullshit. There has to be something I'm doing wrong.
Yeah, there are ways you can improve.
If you don't bring it to my attention, how can I correct it?
Yeah.
And this is what I find really insufferable about universities. You're not allowed to give people actual criticism anymore. You've got to steer them.
And the thing they're studying isn't necessarily a critiquable thing. I'm going to throw a friend of mine under the bus. I won't say who it is, obviously, but if they ever listen to this, they'll be deeply wounded. And I love them dearly. They're actually an amazing human being. But I have a friend who did a doctorate in political science.
Okay.
Already tenuous, all right? Now, I say that as a political commentator. I'm the kind of person who could have done a doctorate in political science, and one day I'll get an honorary one, I promise. But this person did a doctorate in political science, specifically on the issue of soft power. So geopolitically, you've got hard power, which is military. Economic is sort of halfway between hard power and soft power, but then you've got cultural influence. And this person specifically did a doctorate in soft power, majoring in K-pop, Korean pop music.
I'm not seeing the correlation.
And its role in spreading Korean culture into other Asian markets. They did this because they love K-pop and they just wanted to listen to more of it. And this was a way for them to get money for 6 years, getting paid to do a doctorate in this, and connecting it to soft power was a way of making sure that it had some veneer of legitimacy as a political science. To my knowledge, this individual has never had a job, a role, a contract, a consulting, anything, nothing that has involved this.
And this was all done on a scholarship?
I believe so, yes.
Well, I mean, this is no different to our mate Raygun, who has the PhD in breakdancing, but arguably cannot breakdance, which you would think is a prerequisite.
She can breakdance better than what was shown in that particular exhibit, but you put her alongside anyone that is an elite level breakdancer, and no, she can't breakdance.
But this brings me back to this whole thing of pumping out students, right? Like, I am part of the system. I have got a tertiary education. I'm currently back in the tertiary system. I do think it has its place. And the one thing I like about my master's is it's hard. It's really hard. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that challenge. I wanted that motivation to deep dive into something. And my topic might be interesting to some and it might be disinteresting to others. But for me, in my industry and what I do, I wanted to be able to come from a place of authority, having gone into this deeper than a superficial 1 hour chat. Everything that I know, I've read psychology papers, I've read social studies papers, I'm reading books, I'm interviewing people. I get to have I hate saying a piece of paper, but it's a credibility along a topic that really supports my career now into the next 20, 30 years.
Sure.
And whether or not that becomes my life's work, we'll see what happens. But when you're pumping out students who you're like, well, you're qualified, but arguably when they're in the actual role, they're not. I saw this when I qualified. I qualified as the top of my class. I couldn't have got better marks. And I got my first job as a graphic designer. And they're like, we literally have to teach you everything. You're going to have to do an apprenticeship because you're useless.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was the top of my class. Yeah. And what I mean by that is the best thing that happened to me because I came out with an ego and immediately it was dismantled. And I was built back up so that when I did actually have profound usefulness in the workforce, I earned it.
And that's where real self-esteem comes from, is actually bringing value, actually being useful, not being told that you're useful when on the inside you actually can't see the evidence.
And that brings me back to my good news. And I encourage you guys, because I think a lot of people think, I'm too late to learn that now. It's a bit done for me now. I got to a point, the real reason I'm doing my master's is because I was so complacent. I got to the point where I'm making good money, I've got good clients, and life was I was cruising.
Life's okay, life's fine.
And I was like, I don't like cruising. I don't feel challenged. I don't feel like I'm learning. I don't feel like I'm upskilling. I don't feel like I'm climbing that ladder. And you get to a point, and not to say negatively about my mates, but as far as career goes, I'm probably the most successful person, which, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm like, I don't like being the smartest person in the room. I want to be stretched. And when this mentor and I were chatting, I said to him, I'm like, I want to be torn apart. I want you to tell me where my weaknesses are.
So you're familiar with that idea that we end up being the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time around.
Yeah.
And it's a really thought-provoking thing because it throws up some moral dilemmas. Obviously, what that means is you want to spend time with people that are further along, more towards where you want to be. But if that equation also holds true for them, that means that you're their charity case. You're the one who's lowering their overall average. But I think more to the point, it's the aggregate of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But it's also about the mindset of the people that you spend the most time with. Are we trying to create a rising tide where we all can rise and succeed together? You and I have talked about Ben, my mate, who I've been working alongside for well over a decade now, a wonderful film producer. Yourself, myself, each of us have gone through tough times in our own very, very different ways. None of our challenges have looked anything like the others' challenges, but we've all had our challenges. We've all overcome them, and through that process, we're all getting to know each other better. We're all actually going, okay, hey, I think I'm kind of finding my tribe here. I've got other friends that I've found over the last few years, particularly since COVID has really kind of accelerated this process, where I'm realizing that you're the aggregate of the 5 people that you know. It's not about where they're at in absolute terms. It's their attitude towards where they're going.
I think there's a level of emotional intelligence there that is a prerequisite for being able to level up in life as well. Don't get me wrong, intelligence is great. Education is relevant. I'm not shitting on it. I'm literally paying to do it right now. But there's something about those life experiences. I've asked this question before and I'll ask it to you.
Sure.
Would you prefer to have the first half of your life traumatic and difficult or would you prefer the later half?
Yeah, so I would much rather the first half.
Same.
Yeah.
Which is inevitably what has happened to me.
Yeah.
And I said to a good girlfriend of mine yesterday, I was on a shoot, and all of my clients are small business owners, every single one of them, whether they're small or medium-sized businesses, they're all business owners. And I have not talked to a single client in the last 6 months who hasn't had the same feelings that I'm feeling. Right. Now, the person I was working with yesterday runs
as in being squeezed and that sort of stuff that you're talking about.
So she runs a business that turns over quite a few million.
Yeah.
And she was like, Carly, we're spending just as much as we're earning. And just because she earns more than me doesn't mean her pain isn't any less because it's the same pain. It's all just relative to the sum of the turnover. Yeah. And she was like, I've got so many people to feed. I've got all this responsibility. and she's the money earner.
Well, heavy lies the head that wears the crown.
Right.
These people that end up in these positions, like a lot of people say, oh, business owners, they're heartless. They laid everybody off, blah, blah. No, they probably cried themselves to sleep the day they finally accepted the reality that they had to do that. Otherwise, everyone was going to lose their jobs. And
often the business owner doesn't pay themselves. Like that's the biggest issue that business owners run into.
I get really annoyed. Sorry, tangent time. I get really annoyed when people say, oh, your business went bankrupt, so you should have to give everything back, your house, your car. How come he's still got, he's declared bankruptcy. How come he's still got a nice car and he's still got this and he's still got that? It's like, well, okay, you quit your job. Do you have to give back your salary? Right, you get paid over that time for the value that you brought.
But that's just stupidity.
Yeah, well, a smart business owner, when the sun shines, is going to be building up reserves and then moving those into entities where if they are forced into bankruptcy, those entities aren't affected.
Well, I think this is my issue with a lot of these young ones who look at business owners as if like, eat the rich, that whole that sentiment. And it's very simplistic because when you think about it, any business that actually does well, they went through a grind.
Correct.
Now, not everyone. Some people are lucky, but for the most part,
there's a very small percentage.
Yeah, some people are nepo babies. Some people get a bit of a lift, but for the most part, most people, the best part of that business was the years they were sleeping on couches.
Yep.
They were doing their 80-hour weeks. Like when I started my clothing company, when it was making less, but I was like at home and all my clothes were like in the spare room and unpacking at the kitchen table. That was fun. It sucked.
Yeah.
But I romanticized that part more than the bits where I had the money to go and do all the fun stuff.
Well, it's an interesting one because I try to keep that in mind with where I'm at right now because I'm having to do all my own research, my own writing, film my own videos. I don't have a tech person hitting record on my cameras for me. I'm in a studio that I've built in the garage of my own house. I do my own editing, my own uploading. Every word is written by me. Every post is planned by me. Everything's done by me.
Yeah.
And I can see where this is going, and it's going reasonably well. And fast forward, let's say 5 years for argument's sake, I could see myself in a situation where I have the blessing of editors and producers and someone running the business for me, and all of that is happening around me.
And your talent.
And I can absolutely imagine a situation where I'd sit there having a cigar, thinking back to the good old days when life was simple and it was just me and a camera and blah,
you
blah,
didn't
blah.
have
Like,
20 crew to feed.
I completely get, the pressure of going, if my content sucks, it's no longer me and my family that gets hurt. There's 20 other people and their families that get hurt.
Yeah.
That pressure is different.
Yeah. I was going to use a space analogy, but I'll stuff this up. But like there is it's not a glass ceiling, but there is like some kind of pressure point where as an entrepreneur, you have to break through, and it requires a severe level of determination and also self-sacrifice. You have to be somewhat masochistic to be able to penetrate that and get through. And then on the other side is like, that some alleviation of some of that financial stress, maybe get a little bit more free time. And exactly like you said before about celebrities, you can start to outsource a few things.
Yeah,
you
the
get
things
a
in life
cleaner,
that you don't want to do.
someone will do your shopping for you. Those little luxuries that just mean, oh God, I've just got a little bit more free time. But that to get to that, it does require a lot of self-sacrificing.
But also think about the fact that it takes an enormous amount of sacrifice to get to the point where you've got a 7-figure business. But a 7-figure business is still tiny in the grand scheme of things. No offense to anyone that's sitting there going, man, I'm earning 5 figures. No offense to you. But a 7-figure business is actually still very small and probably means the business owner is still only getting 50 to 150 grand at the end of the year, somewhere in there. Then someone has to go, I'm not willing to back off at this point. I'm not going to go, oh, thank God I got the breakthrough. I'm comfortable now. They have to go, no. I'm going to continue this suck.
The hardest part of business is the $1 million to 10.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's the first million. No, it's the $1 million to 10.
They push through the suck to get to 10 million.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people then go, well, now you're on $500,000 a year. 5% of your gross revenue ends up in your pocket at the end of the year. Well done, you. Like, great job. They go, oh, I can back off now. I can finally, right? But then think about psychologically the person who goes, no. I'm going to voluntarily continue the suck. I'm going to forego the lifestyle I could enjoy on $500,000 a year and the time and the friends and everything else. I'm going to continue the suck to get to 100 million.
Yeah.
Now everyone looks at them and goes, dude, come on. Like you've got to
live a little.
Yeah, live a little. And then that person goes, no, I'm going to continue the suck to become a billionaire. And then we look at billionaires and go, why are you so weird? Like all these billionaires, they're all a bit weird. Yeah, they're a bit weird.
Yeah.
They voluntarily.
They're built different.
Yeah, they're built different.
Yeah.
They didn't just go, I want to have $1 billion business. They got to the point where they had $100 million business and went, I'm going to continue to make my life suck.
I can do this better. Yeah. And it's a refining thing. But I want to contrast that. Like, I'm going to bring this back to something that's happened in the news cycle in the last 24 hours. Because this is the thing, right? When you accumulate those assets, people demonize you because you're the other. You have something they don't have. So they therefore look at you and go, oh, well, it's easy for you, rich person.
This is how the other half lives.
Right?
Yeah.
But not realizing, because you weren't present to it. And this is one thing I wanted to say to you as well. Please document everything that you're doing. Like, take photos. And every one of you that's building something out there, please document it. One of my favorite assets that I have is that I'm a photographer, but I was snap happy when I started my first business.
Yeah.
I have all these cute photos of little 23-year-old Carlz, like designing things in like this little shitty desk, and then getting her first box of hoodies, and then my first trade show. And then I have the whole thing documented. And, like, I just feel immense pride. Like, it didn't end with the fairy tale, but I look back and go, what 23-year-old just gets the gumption to go, fuck it, I'm going to do this,
Go for it, yeah.
And I look at my younger self and go, good on you, mate.
Good on you.
I'm proud of you. But so document it. But now we have, a lot of young girls, or I'm going to say young girls because it seems to be young women who are falling for this communism ideology that seems to be the solution to the patriarchy and capitalism.
We can fix that. Don't let women vote.
Is that the 16th Amendment or the 9th Amendment? I can't remember. I don't remember.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to bring up Purple Pingers, a.k.a. Jordan van der Lam, who is the Senate candidate for the Victorian Socialists. Now, Jordan is actually not even Aussie. He's a South African man. But he is here telling us all how we should be approaching the housing crisis. Now, he is on the record of asking renters to send him a copy of the key of the house that they were renting that is now sitting vacant, because he is going to use that key to go into that property and change the locks and allow a squatter to go in and then take up residence in that unoccupied property. And he did this to a woman named Carol, whose father passed away, and his property sat vacant. Now, apparently, allegedly, the property was vacant for over 16 years and still had all her father's assets and things in there. And obviously, I'm assuming she's inherited it and whatnot. But Jordan, being the ever evangelistical man that he is, this bastion of morality, this amazing man who's
stunning and brave, I think.
Stunning and brave, the modern day Robin Hood, I think we'll call him. He has decided to take it upon himself to declare that he will allow that property to be occupied by someone else. And so via him literally putting that incentive out onto social media, squatters broke in and they changed the locks and they sold off a lot of the old man's possessions, and the daughter has since found out about it. And this is where we're at. We've got people like that who feel so emboldened that they can just take. And that is setting a very dangerous precedent. But is he apologetic? No,
of course not.
Couldn't give a damn.
No.
Because in his mind, you have, we don't have, therefore we'll take.
So this is what this actually springs from, is this fixed pie thinking that says there's a certain amount of wealth in the world. There's a certain, we're all just enjoying Earth's bounty. I wish I could go back to the old days where we all just enjoyed, we could just walk around picking fruit naked and enjoying sunshine. And before we invented money, all that stuff. No. Life was short, violent, and brutish, right?
You're lucky if you made it to 40.
Yeah, correct. And the reason why we live so well is not because there's a fixed amount of wealth in the world that we're dividing up between ourselves. It's actually because people on average create more wealth than they consume. That's where the wealth comes from. And we can verify this very easily. Go back 300 years ago and ask yourself, was the average person more or less wealthy than we are today? And the answer is kings were less wealthy than we are today. If you were to go back to a king of some European country and transport them now and say, would you like to swap with Topher Field to have his exact life, a middle-class life living in a unremarkable suburban block outside of a capital city, but he's earning enough money that he can pay his bills and enjoy modern technology like a phone in his pocket and Panadol in the cupboard if he wakes up with a headache, and all the modern conveniences, and food transported from all over the world, kept fresh and cold and delivered conveniently just around the corner, they would swap with me in a heartbeat. So me as an average Australian, I live literally like a king from 300 years ago. So how can we say that there's a fixed amount of wealth in the world if we've got 30 times the population or whatever it is, 10 times the population now to what there was back then, and yet we live better than they do on average, right? It's because actually we're creating wealth as we go along. But people like Jordan They don't recognize the need for hard work.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about the value of hard work. Well, the value of hard work is what it gives back to you. You work hard, you get money back in return, which you can spend. But actually, the need for hard work is that we've talked about before. We are all consuming constantly.
Yeah.
And unless we, on average, produce more than we consume, then the world becomes poorer. If someone is homeless because of an unfortunate set of circumstances that stripped them of their wealth and the product of their labor, I have all the time in the world to helping them get back on their feet. If someone remains homeless, that's because they're not producing value.
Yes.
And that becomes on them.
Yes. It was interesting because I put up I responded to one of Ann and Vance's tweets about stay out of the parents. The government should be parenting the children.
Right.
And some lefty was like, oh, but what about it's always the what about isms, right? Like, what about the children whose parents are broke or, live in domestic violence? What about them? You'll know the term for this, but it's that whole mentality. Well, these people are doing it worse, so we need to bring everyone else back down to this level before
Lowest common denominator.
Yeah, but before we can enjoy. So you and I are not allowed to enjoy the fruits of our labor.
Yep.
The house that we live in, the car that you have, because someone else is so marginalised and so oppressed. We need to drop all of our standards of living so that we all start from this even keel.
Yeah.
What do they call that? Equity.
Yeah, well, they call it equality. And this is, we see
it's
this.
equity. They want us to all start from the same point.
We see this come through in some really absurd ways, and thankfully this is never caught on in any serious way that I know of. But every now and again, academics who just want some attention come out with things like, are you giving your child an unfair advantage by reading to them at night? Like this sort of stuff. It's like, oh, you're just being a good mum or being a good dad. No, you're advantaging your child unfairly. You really shouldn't do that because, poor parents who are working 2 jobs, they don't have time to read to their kids at night.
So feel guilty.
Well, I'm sorry for their situation, but I happen to have a skill that is valuable enough that I can actually make ends meet by working one long hours job.
Yeah.
And I stop work to read to my kids, put them to bed, and then I work.
Wasn't there a situation just recently in the UK where a woman was put in jail or arrested because she wouldn't let her child have an iPad? Did you hear about that?
I don't remember specifically. Grok knows all.
Yeah,
but maybe we can bring that up next week.
I thought that was interesting. But this commentary around the government knows better scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, and just spend some time down at a Centrelink and ask yourself whether would you want to be raised by Centrelink?
No.
Because that's what you're asking for when you want to get the government involved.
All right, I'm getting us back on track because there's some things I really want to talk about. Right. But let's light.
We're at an hour and a quarter. We've got 45 minutes. We're going to try and hit the 2 hour mark.
We're going to lighten the chat with probably the best example of hypocrisy we've had in quite a few, and that's saying something in front of you.
I can't wait.
So, our mate Mike Cannon-Brookes.
Mikey boy.
Yeah, billionaire, Atlassian founder.
He's not being hypocritical, is he?
Climate crusader.
No.
He is currently under scrutiny for building a lake on his property that allegedly has contaminated a neighbour's water supply. Ooh. And there is aerial footage of the property and it shows a construction site. Now, when this has been brought to media's attention, what do you think our friend Mikey said about it?
Oh, well, knowing Mikey would have said, I take full responsibility. This happened on my watch. I will make good on all of this, and I'm terribly sorry for being such a hypocrite that I claim to defend the environment whilst trying to terraform it for my own purposes.
I hate to call you wrong.
Oh, no, really?
However,
Mikey, what are you doing?
Like a true leftist, climate evangelistical, morally superior white privileged male even, he did what...
Sorry, you forgot CIS.
Oh, CIS. I don't know who this is.
Well, as far as I'm
did
aware.
You just assume?
I haven't read his pronouns recently, so you know what? I did assume.
Well, he's done the default of the left, which is blaming a woman, Catherine Manuel, who was sacked for misconduct in 2023.
A middle-aged white man blaming women for his problems. I've never seen that one before.
Yeah, no, me either. I was shocked.
That's a new one.
Shocked and appalled.
Clever, Mikey.
So
well played.
Apparently it was her fault. He's claiming full ignorance and did not know. And it's so bad that apparently the New South South Wales Water Board's gotten involved.
Oh, goodness, waterboarding. I think I could talk to the CIA about that. What I love about this is that he's defended his decision to have a lake on the basis that it was going to have an island in the middle that was going to be like a sanctuary for wildlife.
Water life. Yeah.
Now, this actually comes back, and what he's just done is confirm something that I've been mocked for saying for a very long time, which is that humans intervening in a landscape can make it better for the natural environment, can make it better for species. For example, we get told off for building dams. Guess what dams do? They bring an awful lot of new life to an area. Just because that used to be a valley and now it's a valley full of water doesn't mean that everything's dead. Yes, the trees underneath the waterline, sure, they're dead. But there's fish. You know how fish do in a valley? Not well, right? It brings a different kind of life. It changes things. And what Mike Cannon-Brookes has said in his attempt to defend it, building a beautiful man-made lake for aesthetic purposes on his property, is that no, it's all good. It was going to have a wildlife sanctuary in the middle. In other words, by intervening and terraforming the landscape, I could achieve a superior aesthetic outcome for myself and look after the environment at the same time. And, this is not a sentence I say very often, Mike Cannon-Brookes, you're absolutely right. You absolutely can. And in fact, we should do that sort of thing a lot more often. We should build a lot more dams. We should terraform the earth a lot more than what we do, with an eye on its impact on the environment. Yes, I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm not talking about scorched earth. But let's get away from this idea that just because humans have touched it, it's somehow now inferior from an environmental perspective.
Yeah. Well, what I find really interesting, we're seeing so many examples of this from the climate alarmists, right? Like we talked about the Brazil rainforest that got bulldozed so that they could have the highway.
The climate conference,
Right, and all the private jets flying in. We've got this example. Mike Cannon-Brookes bought himself a private jet.
Was that a float plane by any chance? Was he going to land on that lake?
Probably.
Was that how that was going to work?
Who knows? I mean, I find it really funny. I mean, I'm not against billionaires enjoying their billions.
Sure.
You know, like someone was talking about Mark Zuckerberg's yacht.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so big, it needs a little boat beside it that carries all the resource.
It's called a tender. That's not an uncommon thing.
Is
it needs a tender.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
I don't play around in the billionaire yachting game.
So in the billionaire yachting game, I'm something of an aficionado. I haven't been on Zuck's yet, but he hasn't invited me. But they have the big yacht, and that's the one that is kind of the billionaire's playground. And what people don't realize is that it can take oftentimes a couple of hundred staff living on board to actually make those the luxurious palaces that they are. So the actual proportion, the amount of that yacht that is available to Zuck as the owner of it is going to be less than 50%. More than half of that boat is made up of engineering spaces, crew accommodation, and eating and whatever else, as well as all of the kitchens and galleys and storage and everything else. And they'll have boats and jet skis and all sorts of things on board. Then what they need is another boat that can resupply the big boat, because you don't want the big boat to have to keep going into ports just to resupply all the time. You need another boat that's got a whole bunch of supplies so they can sort of go out and do their thing, and you send off the smaller boat as a runabout, so to speak. But then, of course, each of these have their own little actual tenders that are, the Zodiacs and even some larger ones. So what you've got is sort of boatception. You've got
it's like a babushka doll.
Correct. You've got a Zodiac on the back of a tender, on the back of a just all to service the entire mega yacht. Now Can we talk billionaires for a second?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know what value I'll add or contribute.
People get mad about the way billionaires spend their money. All right. Like, billionaires, that simultaneously we're supposed to believe that rich people are tight asses, but also that they're wasting their money all the time.
Yeah.
Well, both of those things can't be true, right? Now, the thing is, we can say, Mark Zuckerberg's wasting all of that money. He could have done something useful with that money. Well, from the perspective of the shipbuilding yard, he did something useful with that money. Yeah. From the perspective of the 200 people working on board, he did something useful with that money. From the perspective of, we can say, that guy, he made his money, he just built a mansion, and he spent $250,000 just on the landscaping and the outdoor pool? Well, okay, you can call that a waste of money, but he traded $250,000 for $250,000 worth of earthworks and improvements to his home. He didn't become poorer in the result. It wasn't a waste of money. The money's not gone. The money's now in the hands of other people willing to do that work. And here's the thing. Because of the marginal utility of money, money becomes worth less the more of it you have. You are more likely to be willing to spend it on something relatively frivolous. Me, if I have the choice between still water at a restaurant for free out of a tap and sparkling water out of a bottle for $7, I go for the still water because you know what? That $7 is fairly valuable to me. The marginal utility of that money and what else it could do for me is relatively high. For a billionaire, the marginal utility of $7 is precisely zero.
Yeah.
And so they'll get the sparkling water every single time, which means it's very easy to get $7 off a billionaire.
Yeah.
Just offer them sparkling water at a restaurant. You've got $7. It's very easy to get a billionaire to spend $1 million on landscaping. You know how hard it is to get me to spend $1 million on landscaping? Really freaking difficult. I haven't found anyone willing to pay me that much for my kids yet, right? So the reality of wealthy people is that actually having wealthy people in your community, they are willing to spend money on things that the rest of us are not.
This is tangent, but we're watching the movie Blow, with Johnny Depp.
Oh, yeah, about all the cocaine trade.
Yeah,
I watched it a while ago,
Yeah, we were talking about Pablo Escobar.
Was that Lopez? Jennifer Lopez was in that one?
No, that was Penelope Cruz.
Thank you, yes it was.
And Johnny Depp. Yeah. Good movie. But we were talking about Pablo Escobar and what he actually did for Medellin.
Hippopotamuses.
That's the funniest part of it. But he was a bad dude. Yeah. He was a bad dude. I'm not defending Pablo, but he actually did do a lot for the local community. Yeah. He cared enough to,
because even gangsters are smart enough not to shit in their own backyard.
Yeah. So I just find it relative. People get painted with a bad brush, but it's but I think you'll find a lot of people defend him at the same time because they're like, well, he did a lot for our community. So.
And the reality is that there have been times in history, not so much right now, but there have been times in the history of Mexico where it would have been preferable for you to live and raise your family under a mafia-controlled, a cartel-controlled town than under a government-controlled town.
Yeah.
Now, that's varied from time to time.
It's funny you say that because G and I literally had this conversation. We have some weird conversations. But we're talking about, would you rather live under mafia rule or government overreach rule? And I said the mafia because at least the mafia will protect you. That's what you pay for.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the government just takes your money.
What I want to say sounds like I'm trying to be funny. It sounds like a punchline, but I actually mean this entirely seriously. I'm not convinced that there's much difference anymore because governments run protection rackets.
They do, but at least the mafia back in the day, right? They'd come in and they'd take their hit for the week. They'd take their little bit of profit.
Yeah, take that, yeah.
But what that bought you was protection.
Yeah.
And obviously if you didn't pay,
then it's protection from them, but yes. Yeah.
But, at least they protected you, whereas now the government's like, I'm taking all of your money. And quite frankly, I don't give a damn what happens to you.
So a government is the definition of a government is very, very simple. It is an organisation that claims a monopoly on violence.
Yeah.
That's what it is. They say we're allowed to be violent and no one else is. And if anyone else tries to be violent, we will be violent to you. So violent that you won't be able to be violent again in the future. I saw this play out actually in person when I was in Venezuela. We were there for a wedding. The wedding was at it was the most surreal thing. It was like a scene out of a movie. We're at this beautiful Spanish style hacienda on the peak of a hill, 360-degree views. This classic Spanish style building with a big open courtyard in the middle with the trees and plants and everything in this courtyard on this full four-sided building around it. Then with courtyards around that, and then with a big fence partway down the hill, so you can have the view over the fence, but this big fence keeping anyone and everyone out. And you're like, well, who are we keeping out around here? Well, the groom paid the local mafia, essentially. They weren't high-level cartel international trading. This was more of a street gang. But they came to him and said, we hear you're having a wedding. We wouldn't want anything to go wrong. We'd love for everything to go really well for your evening. And we can protect you for a certain amount of money, which was relatively modest. And he knows how it works, and so he pays the protection money. And they did actually show up. They had 4 guys. They had 2 people on the road and then 2 other people stationed around. And I don't know what they were necessarily protecting us from, but it's not like they took the money and then went and just had a booze up at the pub. They actually showed up and they were well presented. And it's like this is a business for them. And you read back in the history of Mexico, and there are many, many times where the cartels have been doing more for schools and education and sports programs and even medicine at times. Now, obviously varies a lot from place to place and moment to moment, but there are times when it's been true that you would have rather have lived under the protection of the mafia. And people say, well, why would the mafia run a school? Well, because they want to recruit new members. They want, they want the community to support them, and they want to have a favorable view. They don't want to shit in their own backyard. They want to have support. But think about it. Why does the government say they need to tax you? Oh, well, so we can provide education, so we can provide healthcare, so we can da-da-da. And by the way, from the population that we're providing all of these things to, we're going to recruit our police officers, our military members. We're going to find our politicians, the new generation of leaders for our particular cartel. Yeah. Then when you add things like the taxi cartel and the way that they have essentially monopolized so many things that ought to be free markets, you just start to realize increasingly there's a really funny black and white cartoon. There's a dad with a newspaper sitting on the couch, and his son walks up to him and says, "Dad, I've decided I want to have a career in organized crime." And his reply is just, "Government or private sector?"
That's funny.
And you realize as time goes by, I mean, that's actually true.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was saying to G when we were talking about this. I was like, I understand why these things get a foothold, and then why there's because I always try and have that devil's advocate view, because I feel like if you underestimate your enemy, then you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Sure.
So I always try and like look at things from the other side, and I'll watch things like that, and it's like it's very easy for Hollywood to persuade you one way or the other. And I was like, Pablo Escobar, how do I feel about him? Like, yeah, he was a bad dude, but you know, I see why a lot of people in Medellin are like, we want him back. He's dead. But,
he was a bad dude, but Top Gear got to visit hippopotamuses in South America, and that kind of makes up for it.
Yeah, there's always a funny thing like that. It's like when they say that truth is stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
But we need, since we're in South America, can we segue to the story that I've been wanting to get to for like an hour and 28 minutes?
Except that he's in Central America. So,
well, down somewhere there, whatever. Yeah. My favourite, President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele. And you sent me.
Oh, it hurt. It hurt.
You sent me
so
a tweet or an X post, and you had to finally acknowledge the badassery of Bukele. You had to sit there and swallow your pride.
Because this was a PR triumph. To be clear, it didn't shift my position on my concerns around the human rights implications of a lot of what he did.
Oh.
But as a PR triumph, this moment. So Bukele was invited to the White House by President Trump. And obviously they've been, they're kind of they've been lumped together now because of the MS-13 situation, the deportations that happened out of the US that went straight into this high security prison that Bukele's got. Then, of course, the media trying to defend a known MS-13 leader who happened to also have gotten residency in the US, who was then extradited out to El Salvador to go to prison because he was an MS-13 kingpin. And MS-13 is now a proscribed terrorist organization inside the United States, which means that in a unanimous decision from the US Supreme Court, 9-0 in favor of Trump, Trump has the right to deport and to strip him of his residency and take away all of the privileges that would normally come with American citizenship. So he's done everything by the book. He's done everything correctly. The media would have you believe otherwise, but they're lying to you. And so as a result of that, Bukele and Trump have kind of been thrown in together. And they're kind of having, whether they like each other or not is irrelevant. They have to defend each other and defend themselves as a pair. But they engineered this magical moment. It was so good. I actually think it was largely organic. They knew what they were going to talk about, obviously, but I don't think this moment had been engineered. But boy, it was beautiful. Bukele comes out with this amazing line about how he doesn't see himself as having locked up thousands of people. He sees himself as having liberated 3 million. And that's a very hard thing to argue against when the reality was they had a murder rate in excess of 100 people per 100,000 per year. 1 in every 1,000 people were being murdered every year in El Salvador. And when you have a situation like that, it's pretty hard to say, oh, no, you haven't liberated 3 million people. Well, he did. He liberated 3 million people from living under what was essentially enemy occupation, right? That's essentially what it was. It was enemy occupation of MS-13 and Barrio 18, the two main gangs, as well as some others. But then what happened was they both linked this back to the crime rates in the large democratic cities. And actually Bukele made reference to immigration and the fact that Trump was actually helping the big Democrat-run cities by controlling the southern border. And this is where it gets really interesting to me, because if you take somewhere like St. Louis in Missouri, their murder rate is 69 per 100,000, right? So it's two-thirds. It's two-thirds of what El Salvador's was.
Yeah.
Chicago is up around 30, 40 per 100. It's a third of what El Salvador's was. So El Salvador was the worst in the world. There are Democrat cities that are not that far behind, all right? And so what they're saying is if this was necessary for Bukele in order to liberate 3 million people from living under what he's characterizing as an enemy occupation, then these same measures are justifiable on the part of Trump because there are parts of America that are living... Can I read the quote? Sure, yeah.
So the quote was, which you loved.
All right.
And Trump loved. He wants to steal it.
Yeah, he wants to steal. It's a great line.
The line was, you have 350 million people to liberate. To liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some.
Yep. And it's very, very, very difficult under the circumstances that he had in El Salvador and the circumstances that Democrat-run cities have in the US. That is a PR win. But they then twisted the knife. Did you watch more?
Oh, I watched most of it, but yeah, go.
They then twisted the knife because Bukele brought up the border, or Trump brought up the border, and Bukele mentioned that the crossings, the arrivals had dropped by 95%, and Trump actually brought him up to speed. The latest news was that they dropped by 99.1%, and he had his border person in the room there with him, and he confirmed that with her. And then Bukele says, why aren't the media reporting that? And of course, this is a press conference.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing.
Of course he does.
He knows what he's doing.
Setting a cat amongst the pigeons. That's why I love him.
So Trump turns around and he says, "Oh, CNN, they're right here. You know, why aren't they reporting that? That's a great question. Why? You know, I don't think they like good news. I think they hate our country."
Yeah.
Now the thing was, this wasn't just a press conference. This was going live. So live on CNN, he's just called out CNN. It was just the most beautiful, beautiful thing, and it's going to be really interesting to me because even for someone like myself, who right here on this podcast, I've been critical of I've got some concerns about the human rights implications of how Bukele has gone about doing what he's done. I don't disagree that something needed to be done. I have some concerns about how it was done. But even I'm going to have to be thoughtful about how I express that going forward, because that line, in order to liberate millions of people, you have to lock up some.
In the words of one Spock, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of a few.
Okay, but that is also used to justify fascism, communism, and the
appropriate
murders of
there.
hundreds of millions of people. But this is why I'm so conflicted on this, right? I lived under the emergency of COVID. Oh, we have to put aside your human rights because this is an emergency. Well, that was completely inappropriate, completely out of line, completely unjustified. Bukele's essentially used the same logic for a very different situation. I'm not trying to say they're the same situation, a very different situation.
Yeah.
If we accept the logic in one situation, what's the difference that means that we could reasonably not accept it in another? Or are we just opening up a floodgate here, a Pandora's box?
I think that's a real absolute way of looking at things. I understand the sentiment, and I think it's good to have the conversation. But I do believe, and I've said this time and time again on this podcast, that there does become a tipping point where any inaction is just you cementing that this is what you want, right? So in America, Trump is literally the bad guy because he's going, you know what, I will take the fall because something had to be done.
Has to be done. Yeah.
And, you know, whether you want to sit there and talk about the tariffs or whatever, his decisions, you can argue with him on the academic side, in the, you know, in all the nitty-gritties, sure.
Yeah.
But we're not living in this, like, you know, academic, you know, idealistic thing. We're dealing with real world scenarios where people are dying and things are people being crushed, or, you know, it's gotten to a point where it is so contemptible that any further inaction will just cement the immediate decline of these countries.
Yeah.
And so what Nayib did is, you know, he's got a favorability rating of over 90%.
Yeah.
Name another politician that has that.
He won his last election with 83%. Now, what's interesting, so there are people that accuse him of understating the current murder rate to make it seem like it's even better than what it is, and there are people that accuse him of various things like that. No one that I could find online is offering serious concern about the legitimacy of his popularity and his election.
Can I just be devil's advocate? Because I find this, this is where I get really mad. I don't frankly, excuse me, I'm going to swear, I frankly do not give a fuck about any political person, any MP, anyone in a position of authority, or any think tank, moralistic academic. You know who I care about? The people who live in El Salvador, the average Joes. What do they feel like? How do they feel? How are their lives impacted? That's the only metric that I find is relevant in these, because we can sit here, you know, I watched that, I'm going on a tangent and I'm going on a rant apparently. Everyone buckle up. I watched that David Smith and Douglas Murray interview, that train wreck on Joe Rogan, and I didn't come away from that feeling any way inclined to who won that. But I watched Douglas Murray, who I'm very fond of, right? I'll make a point. Sit there from an academic point of view and basically dress down someone who was very passionate about his topic and basically did the old look down the nose and go, have you been there? You can't speak about Palestine unless you've been there. And like, I love Douglas Murray and I think he makes a lot of good points. And I was like,
But he's a Ponce.
who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
You pretentious wanker.
Yep.
You know, and so and this is where I get really annoyed. What's the organisation, the big international organisation, Amnesty International? They're the people who have sort of been leading the charge around the human rights stuff with El Salvador.
Yep.
Sure, there may be one or two people who have been sucked up in the vacuum that shouldn't be.
1 or 2,000 or potentially 10 or 20,000.
I'm not arguing that that's not the case. But at some point, if we're going to sit here and go, we can't do anything, it's perfect, you are no different to Daniel Andrews saying, we're not letting you out of lockdown until we get to 0 cases. 0 is not a possibility.
So action is different to inaction, and I understand, obviously the Bonhoeffer quote, not to act is to act, not to speak is to speak. I understand that. I'm mindful of the history of that. But the precautionary principle being applied to say, we can't let anybody out, we have to keep violating your human rights in order to protect you, versus the precautionary principle the way it should have been applied during COVID, which is we're not quite sure yet, so we're going to not do anything and wait and see till we get more information. Action is morally different to inaction. So inaction, I think, is more morally defensible oftentimes than action is. But there comes a point where action is compelled. From a theological perspective, action is compelled once someone asks for help. So once you have a population that is saying, do something about this problem, I think you are, as the leader of that country, you are now morally compelled to find something that you can do that is constructive about that. With a situation, what would I have done in a situation like El Salvador's? Well, that's a very, very tricky question. I would probably have, if I'd had Bukele advising me and saying, this is what you need to do, I'd be sitting there going, we can draw up a set of rules, particularly around their tattoo culture. The minute they are wearing one of the tattoos that says they've killed somebody, let's include them in the people we round up straight away. Their own tattoo culture tells you a lot about what MS-13 agrees that they've done, what Barrio 18 agrees that they've done. So you might not have the evidence yet, but you know that their own subculture, within their own society, they are believed, they are accepted as someone who has done X, Y, and Z. You could scoop people up on that basis. But I think where he extended it to the point that it was people who were associating with these gangs, and let's not forget the power that they had. If your older brother joined MS-13, Are you out there on the streets going, I hate MS-13, I object to everything? No, of course you're not.
I understand that, but I think my frustration with this sentiment, and I get it from the academic point of view, I understand that, but what is the value of those lives that get lost in the interim whilst we try to round up the resources to be able to do things the moralistic way? Like, so just let me give you guys the example. So let's say, I'm just going to use round numbers. I'm not going to use the exact numbers just to simplify the argument. Let's say per day in El Salvador, at a population of 3 million people, 100 people are dying per 10. Day.
It was about 10. To use real numbers, it's roughly 10.
Let's say 10 people are dying. Yep. Now, if it's 10 people you don't know, you're a little bit more removed from it. If it's 10 people in your immediate family, all of a sudden it matters a lot more to you, right? So that's relative. But let's say you know that. So every day of inaction is costing 10 lives. Mm-hmm. And we go, all right, Nayib's come in. He has a protocol that he's going to be able to clean this up in 18 months, and he's going to prove that he can do it. But there's going to be a couple of people that get put in prison, not killed, put in prison indefinitely, or, maybe for a few years until we can straighten that out on the other side. Would you prefer to keep wasting 10 people a day for another 2, 3, 6, 10 years until we accumulate the resources needed? And by resource, I don't mean money. I mean the people, the infrastructure, the prosecutions to be able to go, all right, we've rounded up 10 new gang members today. And every day that's delayed, you're losing 10 people. How do you evaluate that equation?
So where I was getting to was...
I'm angry. Sorry.
I would have drawn the line at a more restricted level than what Nayib did. Mm-hmm. He painted with a very broad brush. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the parallels to Duterte are probably a little bit unfair, but at the same time not completely unfair, where he basically made it open season. Anyone who was believed to be involved in the drug trade could be murdered in the street. Mm-hmm. And all you had to say was, well, I thought he was a drug dealer, and you had no case to answer at that point. That's the extreme end there. But I don't disagree necessarily. By the time you get to the point where, in a population of 3 million, it's 10 murders a day in a city with half the population of Victoria, or a country with half the population of Victoria. You've got a big problem at that point. I don't necessarily disagree with rounding people up on the basis of their tattoos and known associations. But I think what you have to do, in addition to building that type of prison, I think is probably a really good thing. I think treating them in the way that he is, really, really strict and really, really hard. And with no opportunity to continue their gang activities while they're in there.
Humiliation that I think is really needed. It's a very raw, real human emotion, and humiliation. No one likes it. It serves as a really good resource to be able to guide people to either start adopting better values, or at least give them some boundary line that they can't cross.
So what concerns me with my main issue with what he's done, I can accept that there is this was an emergency type argument that would justify a lot of it. There are two things that I can't accept. I think he's painted with too broad of a brush, and he's not planning on putting these people on trial. So he will never discover the people that he swept up with his too broad of a brush. He will never discover the younger brother that wasn't really that involved but had to pretend to be enthusiastic about it because otherwise he was going to get in all sorts of trouble. He's not going to discover the shopkeeper that just had to find a way to keep his shop alive. So sure, I'll join your gang. He's not going to find out that he swept up those people. So what I would do in that situation is I go, okay, we have a crisis. This is basically an enemy occupation. We're going to gather up all the people that we can be relatively confident are actually enemy agents, in this case gang members who are active. And then we're going to put them on trial in the reverse order of how confident we are that they're terrible human beings. If we are very sure that this is a ringleader, gang leader, blah, 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 he can sit and rot and wait his turn at the end of the queue. He'll be the last person to be put on trial. We're going to keep him in prison until then. It's all the people we're like, oh, who are you again? Have we come across you before?
Yeah.
Oh, you got swept up because you've got all the tattoos. Yeah, you look like one of them. All right, we're going to put you on trial first.
But can I
to
contrast
find out
this?
Who you are.
This is probably a big leap, but I just want to bring it back to this. So that case we talked about last week, the African American kid, the 17-year-old who stabbed the white kid at the athletic meet.
Yeah.
He has had his bail reduced from $1 million down to 250. He's now out.
Yep.
And there's all this, I haven't been able to verify it because when you see stuff on X, I don't know, is that true? They bought an
a lot of people don't
Escalade
put links on X, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't jump down that unless I know it's actually happening. They're talking about how the funds raised for him, they've bought a house and they're living in a gated community because he's catching all this heat. Now, the thing that really frustrates me about this is that's that whole thing of it's righteousness, right? It was self-defense, and you're arguing something Americans have the right to defend themselves. They're using the self-defense argument. There apparently is footage of the event, of it taking place. There's plenty of witnesses. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happened. A young man was stabbed in the heart and lost his life over been asked to vacate his seat.
I disagree with the statement, it doesn't matter what happens. It does matter what happens, but in this case, what happened does not justify what was done.
But this is my point, right? So we're getting into the weeds now of was it self-defense? And, this has happened. And when you go and read the sentimentality on either sides of the argument, neither of them are seeing this with a very clear head. It doesn't matter what his race is. I think that's an irrelevant part of the argument.
We talked about that last week. That's the least interesting thing about this.
But this is what happens when we start splitting hairs. And so now what we're going to see is it'll be really interesting to see this case come to court, because apparently his original lawyers dropped him, but he now has someone who's offering free legal aid or something. So it really depends on whether or not these are star prosecutors or whatnot. Yeah. But my point is, because now we're in the weeds of how does this work? Is it self-defense? We're arguing all these things on a theoretical basis. The point is, a young man was stabbed in the heart. I can't emphasize that enough. This kid should be in jail, whether it was manslaughter or first-degree murder or second-degree murder. He should be in jail. We have the evidence that points that he did the thing. We're not asking, did he do the thing? We know he did the thing. It was it premeditated, or was it just, he snapped or something?
Yeah, a rush of blood.
But how was he allowed on the streets? And this is my point with the justice system, and this is why I defend that. We bring it back to Victoria, right? Jacinta Allen, under the heat of Fox FM and Fifi and Fev and their online survey, she was copping so much heat she had to come out and acknowledge that she's done it wrong. Yep. Now, since then, do you think youth crime has gone down?
Nope, and I believe all the bail reforms have now been pushed into the never as well.
Correct. So nothing has happened, right? And this is why I'm getting really angry about it, because we're going to sit here and be all moralistic. Yes, okay, we got to make sure we have due process. Yes, we need to make sure we have all our I's dotted and all our T's crossed, because we want to make sure that we don't round someone up. And in the meantime, more people suffer. Okay. And more people are being robbed in Victoria, more people are being held up. Home invasions haven't gone down. As a matter of fact, it's just creating copycats because all these kids just want to go and be like their friends now.
So the Victorian situation is very particular. This relates to the fact that they are not remanding in custody people who have reoffended on bail.
Yeah.
Right. That's a very particular thing. It's a very easy problem to solve. It's just a lack of will to solve it.
But do you see the point I'm making though? Like we're saying that, we need to do things by the book. But by the book, who's saying what are the perimeters to do it by the book?
But by the book doesn't have to require us releasing known violent criminals back onto the street for the 20th time. Like those are not the same thing. You're conflating. You're putting those two things on top of each other and saying you saying that you have to do things by the book says we have to release violent criminals back onto the street just because they haven't had their trial yet. No, that's not
what I'm saying is because no one can argue what the book is.
Sure. So in Victoria's case, if someone commits a non-violent offence, then yes, they should get bail the first time until they've been put to trial and actually proven beyond reasonable doubt in a court of law again with a jury of their peers that they're actually guilty of a crime. That is the default setting, and that's the correct default setting. They then reoffend whilst on bail. Well, now you don't get bail a second time, right? That is what the book should say. That's what it used to say, and that's how it should be. Something like in the US, I don't know the history of the guy that did the stabbing.
Yeah.
Is he a first-time offender? Does he have a history of violence? Was he already out on bail? What have you? I don't know the particulars in that particular case. But I would actually argue that unless it can be found that he represents a clear and present danger, which if he's a first-time offender, having never snapped before, then it's probably a matter of psychological evaluation and then going from there. The reality is trial by media and trial by public opinion is always a bad idea, even in the occasions where it turns out that the media and the public opinion were correct. Look at something like the trial of Lindy Chamberlain here in Australia, right? The dingo ate my baby. Okay. She was thrown in prison, her life was destroyed, her marriage was ended, and she spent decades as the woman who murdered her own baby out in the remote Australian wilderness until suddenly they discovered that she was none of those things. Now, the reason why that happened was actually because the media got a hold of the story and turned her into a villain while the trial was still ongoing. It wasn't even possible to find an unbiased jury by the time it actually went to trial. They did it anyway because they were so sure that she was this monster that they'd made her out to be in their minds. The moral certainty, the moral confidence of the public is the very thing that led to one of the worst injustices in Australian legal history. So we look at that and we go, that is extremely clear cut. I agree with you that it's extremely clear cut, which is why we have to be doubly careful to cross our T's, dot our I's, and actually go by the book. This is the reason why the book exists. The Lindy Chamberlain case led to reforms in Australian legal the Australian legal system. It's people like her that are the reason why the book exists.
Yeah.
So we need to be really careful in moments like this.
I agree with you on I agree with you on the sentiment. I totally agree. But my point that I keep making is that it has gotten so bad that every day we don't take action is just further causing needless suffering.
Sure. But that action can be done in the case of Victoria, this is so simple. It is absolutely disgraceful that they don't simply turn around and go, okay, every single person that has been released on bail for a second time, your bail is now revoked. You're coming in, you're being remanded in custody until such time as we can actually put you on trial. And if we don't have room in our prisons, well, then we're going to release a bunch of people that are just in prison because they had weed or some stupid thing like that to make room for you because you are a suspected violent criminal who has reoffended whilst on bail. That's a very, very easy problem to solve that doesn't involve having to violate anyone's human rights. This isn't a human rights balancing issue here in Victoria.
But the issue is, I totally agree with you, but we don't have smart people in government.
No,
we
don't.
have people who have no incentive to fix things because it's not directly impacting them. And until it's just in Alan's home that's been robbed, I don't think we'll see a huge amount. And that's why the weight of the silent majority or the weight of the average person, it needs to get to a point where they're crushed under it. And I think that's what happened in El Salvador. The population was begging for someone to do something.
For something to happen. And so now we've got a precedent in El Salvador that is giving very good results in the short term at the expense of human rights, which often leads to very bad results in the long term, but it's really going to come down a lot to what Bukele does with the popularity that he has now in the next couple of years. People are saying, oh, he's a dictator, he's a fascist, he's a this, he's a that. Well, he might not be. On the evidence of what he's done so far, I think that's a very, very long bow to draw. But I can understand why the people who want to attack him find that a convenient attack angle, because it can look that, it can be made to look that way. I see that too,
but everything these days is always absolutes and extremes. So you can't just have someone who's decisive and conservative. They have to be a fascist.
Yeah. And you can't have someone who is willing to break a few eggs in order to make the omelette of dealing with the gangs, and then is actually going to not go further and not become the thing that they, that's entirely possible. He might be that guy.
Yeah.
But I think we always do still need to be very, very careful and very, very measured anytime we give approval to the government violating human rights, and anytime we push down to the point where the camera battery is running at about, 7%? Are my eyes deceiving me?
No, that one's about to go to. So should we pause? Because we have one more thing to talk about.
I think we need, what time are we up to?
We're at 1:52.
Oh, goodness. If we can do the next thing in 8 minutes, we'll be okay.
One back. We'll be back.
One back?
One back. One moment.
One
moment.
Lettuce.
We'll be back. People who make it to that level, you require a level of sociopathy to be able to operate at that level.
Yeah. Well, so what is it? 1 in 100 people born are psychopaths, but 1 out of every 25 politicians or high-level executives is a psychopath. Yeah. Like they're overrepresented by about 4 times, I think, is the latest research on that.
Well, they also have every single one of us has elements of those in us. We have traits of
the dark triad.
Yeah, narcissism, Machiavellian.
Yeah.
And
except for me, I'm perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like, those aren't always demonic traits to have. I mean, a sociopath is able to work at a capacity that the average person can't.
Think about someone who is a saturation diver that spends a week at a time down in a tank at the bottom of the ocean, so that they can do work that no other human being can do.
You're built differently.
You're not normal. You are an outlier in some way.
And same with anyone who's a true genius or a truly exceptionally gifted person. Like, you have to have that one-track mind, that ability to just be able to phase out everything else and fixate. I mean, that's why Elon Musk, I don't think Elon Musk is a psychopath, but I think there's an element to him that, makes him gifted.
And can I just, more importantly than talking about the man who is changing the world right now, is how good was my dingo ate my baby?
That was pretty good.
I thought that was pretty good.
Do you know what though? Like, I do know the story, but I wasn't born when that all happened. So it's like
my dad was in the movie.
Was he? It's just not really, like, I just know about it as like a cultural reference.
Yeah. No, it was a huge deal. It was
in the 80s? Early 80s?
Oh, gosh. I think it was 70s, but don't quote me on that. I don't actually know.
Did you press that?
Yeah.
You're smart. So I just looked down. I was like,
I just wanted to catch you out and get you on a hot mic moment where you were just not aware of. Yeah.
No, I'm on it.
All right. Anyway, sorry, we had one more thing and we've only got a few minutes left. Let's go.
Well, yeah. Where did we end up on the El Salvador thing? We done?
Look, we've both made our points. There is still some distance between us. Broadly speaking, we both want the same outcome.
Yeah.
I just care about human rights, and you're a human rights violator. That's all.
Well, after having mine violated for 2 years, I feel like it's only fair.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so the next one is a big one, and I haven't been able to read a whole lot on this because I think it only happened either overnight or late yesterday. The UK Supreme Court has defined what a woman is.
Yes, boom.
And it is the legal definition of a woman refers exclusively to biological females impacting policies on single-sex spaces and services.
So this is in relation to what is a woman? This is Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh's documentary from the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh documentary from the Daily Wire has now gone mainstream. The question has been asked and answered in the highest court in the United Kingdom. Now, this was in relation specifically to who qualifies as a woman under their anti-discrimination legislation, because obviously if you have a protected attribute, you have to decide who has that attribute.
Yes.
Now, there's a funny Australian link here, or actually it's sort of not a link, it's more of just my brain doing its weird stuff. My brain goes back to when Andrew Bolt, the political commentator, asked the question, who qualifies as an Aborigine or not? If we're going to have special programs, if we're going to have special treatment, if we're going to have things that you can only qualify for if you are Aboriginal, then the question of who is Aboriginal becomes a very live question and a perfectly reasonable one. Now, he was actually sued just for asking the question. And we saw essentially the same playbook was happening with what is a woman. You can't even ask that question. A woman, if they say they're a woman, they're a woman. And now, thankfully, that's come to an end where it's like, well, no, hang on. We need to, if we're going to have special categories and special treatment, which I don't agree with, by the way, but if it's going to exist, then we have to have a way of actually agreeing on who's in what category. I agree with the Supreme Court's decision about what a woman is for the purposes of legislation. But can we just pause for a minute and appreciate how utterly unhinged we have become as a culture that we had to have a lawsuit with lawyers and people wearing wigs and wearing the fancy costumes, getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to decide what the definition of a woman was going to be.
This comes back to my previous comment where I was talking about, frankly, we're just being insulted every day by these arguments. Being able to sit there and have the time to be able to debate what a woman is whilst people can't turn on their heating, whilst people are living, in declining conditions.
Childless lords living in high towers musing on heraldry.
Correct.
That is how Tolkien put it in one of the most beautiful lines from the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
That's a perfect quote because what we have is people who are living. When I say privileged, I hate using it in the sense of that the current buzzword.
But if you are on a 6-figure salary and you are a Supreme Court judge in the United Kingdom, you are an exceptionally privileged human being.
Of course you are.
Yeah, you enjoy an enormous number of privileges.
You also don't have the same everyday issues that you need to overcome. Like, can you get your child babysat so you can go and do that extra shift? Or, do you have to pay this extraordinarily large utility bill? Or
I'm fairly sure that they're not bothered by the ULEZ scheme and the congestion charge in London.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not really a big issue for them.
So for them, and this comes back to what I was just saying before, it's like, quite frankly, anyone who lives in a position of privilege like that to sit there and have the amount of time to argue over things that have been known since the dawn of time, since human civilization. Yeah. I just think it speaks to the massive divide between the haves and the have-nots. I've talked about this before. I think it was the Kenyan Prime Minister or the Kenyan President. And he talked about, the CNN was there, the correspondent, and she was asking him about LGBT rights. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, not really.
This happened, I think, quite a few years ago. I don't know if they're presidents or prime ministers, whatever. Anyway, Kenyan. And the CNN correspondent was trying to argue about the rights of gays and lesbians in, was it Nigeria or Kenya? One of the two. Somewhere there. Doesn't matter. And he was like, well, we don't really have that problem here, so it's not something I need to concern myself with. And she's like, but what about the gay people here that, their rights, what about those? And he's like, well, frankly, the people here, I think it was Nigeria actually, are worried about running water and AIDS and malaria. And that seems to be something that takes up the most amount of time in their head. They don't really have time to worry about all that stuff.
That is a luxury problem.
Yeah, and that's basically what it said. And the CNN correspondent, is this white woman who's just sitting there going like, but he's like, no, I don't think you're understanding. That's a privileged problem to have.
So there was a really powerful fundraising campaign that was run for one of the charities that does, humanitarian work in poor parts of the world. And it was sort of the classic photographs of typically African children, malnourished, obviously living in terrible and challenging circumstances. But the slogans, and then they would have, my memory is that they had the props with them. But it was, I hate it when my phone charging cable doesn't reach my bed. And it's it's the relatable first world problem slogan with the picture
incredible.
Of that person. And I'll have to dig it up. And it was just a brilliant campaign. But yes, we've completely lost all connection with reality. Did you ever see Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman?
Yeah.
So he goes to Africa and he talks to a tribe and he asks them, what if a man wants to become a woman? And they're just kind of like, well, they can't.
Yeah, it's quite simple, really. It's very simple.
They can't. I mean, you can want it all you want, but they can't do it. And they're all having a laugh. They're all having a giggle.
Isn't this the cost of intellectualization, though, and the academia? Like you get to a point where you're in the weeds about ridiculous
You have
subjects.
to be very, very educated to be this dumb.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I said. I think I said this last podcast where we were talking about how it gets to a point where you can sit there and gaslight people about what is a woman and men can get pregnant and all this sort of stuff. But when it comes to a point where that person's only concerns are their house, rent or mortgage, their children, feeding them, the utilities, and that financial strain, all of that stuff falls by the wayside. No one cares.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that the end of woke or peak woke, the receding of the wave of woke has come at the same time that cost of living has become the number one issue.
I think that's what killed it. Yeah. I would argue that's what killed it because talking about it tangibly and like, over there. And it's exactly like I said before about the murder rate in El Salvador. 10 people doesn't mean much because you don't know those 10 people. But when they have a face and a name or there's someone you have a relationship with, arguably those lives become more valuable.
Yeah.
And it's the same with woke. In 2020 when it all started becoming really mainstream and we started discussing pronouns and men can get pregnant and all this nonsense, that was when everyone was stuck in their homes and everyone was on the internet. Basically, everyone was on social media. And so we started arguing about it. But back then you were getting a handout from the government or you were sitting on a cushy job when you were in the laptop class.
Laptop class, yeah.
So it was easy to talk about that stuff. But now it's really hard for someone to care about your pronouns. Like I've seen so many examples of this and I'll just speak generally. But like, some progressive person gets up with like crazy coloured hair and a septum piercing and goes, oh, I was misgendered today. And people like get a real problem.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, basically.
Correct.
5 years ago, you wouldn't have said that. You're like, oh, I understand that point of view.
Oh, that must be very difficult.
Yeah, I can see that.
What I'm looking forward to now is when a similar lawsuit has to be decided by the Australian Supreme Court, because it is going to be hilarious.
Didn't we have one with Sal Glover, though, where the courts declared that trans women are women?
Sorry, when I said Supreme, I meant High Court, the Federal High Court. I think hers was still state because I think the prosecution was under state legislation. I'll have to look that up. I'll give Sal a call and try and get clarification on that. But for me, to have differing definitions of what is a woman in different jurisdictions that then compete against each other in things like Olympics and Commonwealth Games and these sorts of things is going to get funny.
Yeah.
It's going to get hilarious because then you're going to have these people in wigs having to sit down across the table from each other and debate each other about why their definition of what a woman is right and the other person's definition of what a woman is wrong, and therefore they should get the governing body of that particular sporting agency to allow the man who is a woman to actually compete over here and there, and just watching these people tie themselves in knots.
Yeah. And
the job of people like you and me, as that spectacle unfolds, is going to be to point and laugh and make sure the entire world watches.
I just pulled up Sal Grover. Sorry, I got a name up. Sal Grover's. And so basically it was against Roxanne Tickle, who is known as Tickle versus Giggle. And essentially it was argued in the federal court. April 24 was the first test these gender ideology provisions, debating whether sex or gender identity takes precedence in law. And the argument was Tickle's legal team argued that Grover's exclusion of transgender women treated them as men, constituting discrimination. Grover's team, led by Catherine Davies, maintained that sex is a fixed biological category and the app was a protected space for cisgender women. So the ruling was Justice Robert Bromwich ruled that Grover indirectly discriminated against Tickle based on gender ideology, ordering Giggle to pay $10,000 in damages plus legal costs. The court rejected Grover's claim that sex is unchangeable, citing legal precedents over 30 years. She's launching an appeal.
Yeah. So that's not the High Court yet. That's the federal court. So I was wrong. I thought it must have been the Supreme Court at a state level, but it was federal legislation. It was a federal court case, but that's not the High Court. The High Court hasn't yet ruled.
So the High Court's responsible for constitutional...
It's responsible basically for anything that can't be resolved at a lower level, but it's specifically constitutional. So lower, I think the other courts, I'm not a legal expert, but fundamentally they can't rule anything. No one can rule anything that changes the interpretation and understanding of the Constitution. That has to go to the High Court in order for that to
happen. Do you know how I know about this?
How do you know
about this? A great Australian movie called The Castle.
Oh, yeah, the vibe of the thing.
The vibe, the Marbo, the vibe.
Well, that's essentially what they're saying gender is. It's just the vibe of the thing, you know?
But, and again, it's what a privileged position you are in to be able to sit there and argue among the weeds about what defines a woman.
And what a complete waste of everyone's tax money. That this is consuming resources and time and attention. I mean, it's a good thing we've solved all of our other problems. Obviously, we've got no problems with crime. There's no geopolitical issues. There's no economic issues. We must have solved all of those problems, and we're down to the really the little problems down the bottom of the pile, right? The ones that aren't so urgent.
We're doing so well that we can now argue about this because everyone's so lucky.
What is a woman?
Can we end on this? I find it really interesting because I look at a lot of this stuff. I am a woman, a real one.
What?
Yes, I am a real one, and I will die on that hill. Last time I checked, and every time I do check, it is immutable.
I'm going to take your word for it, but wow, on that bombshell.
Well, I look at this, right, and I get really defensive about this caricature of women, right? Now, I used the example before of those women in space and the giggling, carry on, the drama. Like, I feel like that is a caricature of a woman. I definitely know some women that behave that way, but like Dylan Mulvaney, right?
I was about to talk about Dylan, good old Dylan.
I find that just so regressive that is how people depict women.
And that was celebrated, that Dylan comes out and goes, oh, I'm much more emotional today. It must be because I'm a woman now. Why am I crying?
Oh, don't you do
I did some shopping and I felt better. This is the shallowest, most paper cutout version of what womanhood is, that has been socially unacceptable to caricature women in that way for 30 years.
But if a man does it under costume, it then becomes like stunning and brave.
Right.
Like,
that's right.
My frustration, right, is like I've always been what they used to call, but now is a very rare thing, a tomboy.
Ooh.
Always been a tomboy. My parents thought I was gay because I like to play with my brother's toys, and that's because my brother was 5 years older than me, and everyone around me was
cool.
a dude.
Yeah.
So by default, I did dude stuff because that's all I had. But women have to be like this to be discussed as feminine, right? Like there's always that argument, like what is feminine? What should women wear? What should women dress? Like no one has that same discussion around a man, right? It's always about a woman. You know, if she wears high heels and her boobs are out, she's a whore. But if she doesn't do that, she's a prude. Like it's always absolutes. There's never any like you can just. That's just who you are. That's just parts of your personality. And so when I see all this stuff happen, like, you know, Lauren Sanchez, Jeff Bezos' fiance, perfect example. I would call her a caricature. She is everything you would expect a billionaire's wife to be. Plastic fantastic. And I think she's arguably quite successful in her own right, from what I understand.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so, but you don't see any of that because she presents, you know, all plastic fantastic. And then you got Katy Perry who's going on light and love and, oh, I'm so girly and feminine. It's like... It's so insulting to your average woman who can hold an intelligent conversation. She might enjoy some feminine traits. Maybe she likes makeup. Maybe she likes to crochet. Maybe she likes to cook. God help her. But you're not allowed to have any of that because if you don't fit into one of these like pigeonhole expectations, caricatures of a woman, therefore you're somewhat irrelevant. And so to have someone then arguing what is a woman, I just sit here and I'm like, where are all the feminists? You are literally eroding everything that the women that came before us tried to advocate for.
The feminists are people like J.K. Rowling who are the ones being attacked.
Well, she's called a TERF now.
Yeah, the trans-exclusionary radical feminist.
You know, like I'm not saying her name because it's like summoning Beetlejuice, but our favourite Melbourne-based feminist, you know, who I'm alluding to, she looks like Beetlejuice.
That's an insult to Beetlejuice.
Yeah. But, you know, she's a perfect example. Like, you will align with me 100% ideologically and in this way, otherwise you are the problem.
And, importantly, keep up as I change my mind.
Correct.
Because that's what's happened here. This is why feminists have been left behind, is because the train didn't stop at their station. They fought hard to get the train to the feminist station, then they got off. Didn't realise that same track was going to carry on to the trans station, and that's you know, and they're like, oh, hang on, we didn't think the train was going to keep going. And people like me, who all along were going like, guys, do you realise which direction you're going in? We're like, no, but we don't want to go there. I know you don't.
Yeah.
But the train ain't going to stop at your station.
Correct.
Right.
Well, it's the same argument around the trad wife stuff, right? So now they're going, oh, trad wives are dangerous. They're setting a dangerous precedent. You know, it's Handmaid's Tale stuff. I'm like, wasn't the whole thing of feminism the right to choose?
And so I put up a post on Facebook earlier this week. There was an article coming out slamming these extreme right-wing men who refuse to date woke women.
I've got a lot to say about this.
And my counterpoint was just I thought we couldn't help who we loved. So
love is love.
If I don't find a blue-haired, you know, beached whale attractive, then that's not that's not my fault. Okay, you can't. I mean, I know they do say that, and also love is love, and you can't help who you love. I can't help it if I love feminine, soft women who have the skills and the desire to turn a house into a home. If that's what I love, I'm sorry, that I'm just wired that way.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
Well, then you'll have
And
people.
don't you kink shame me, by the way.
You can use their words on them, but you know, I see that all the time. Like these body positivity women going, you know, if you won't date a fat girl, that's because you're fat phobic and that's a problem and you're a bigot and all this sort of nonsense. I'm like, so what you're saying is that you're expecting everyone on this planet to feel some level of attraction to you, and if they don't,
It's
that
their
person's
fault.
wrong.
Yeah.
It's not you.
Yeah.
And my frustration with this is like, you know, I've got a couple of girlfriends who are single, and I feel like I can say this now because I'm no longer single. I'm smug and in a very happy relationship. It's my turn, damn it. And Gareth and I always laugh about this. We're like smug. But, you know, I was single for a very long time, and I've since had a couple of my single girlfriends going, oh, you don't know what it's like. And I'm like,
Excuse me? Excuse me? Yeah.
So what? Single girl of 12 years here, but I don't know what it's like. Oh, you're all happy and loved up. You don't, bitch, I have paid single tax for most of my life. Don't you be telling me what I know or not.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, but you know, you're lucky. I'm like, what was luck? I found Gareth at 38 and boy, did I kiss some frogs. You know, like you think about it, like I deserve Gareth because, man, I went through it. You know, like I won the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because I went on that journey.
Yeah.
But, you know.
You had to deal with some leprechauns along the way.
100%. And, you know, but my point is this, it's like, oh, but now you're that, you don't get to have an opinion,
Sure.
which just infuriates me. But, I mean, they say this with love. I'm talking, again, like generalized, but that comment like, oh, you don't know what it's like. And I was like, no, I do know what it's like.
Been there. Yep.
Because what I did was I grew up in a generation that had Sex in the City. And I watched people like Carrie Bradshaw become this bastion of femininity, women's rights, like girl boss. I grew up in that entrepreneur wave of girl boss, Sophia Amoroso from literally Nasty Girls talking about women want to be CEOs and all this stuff. And I fell for it. And I lived that life. And you know when I was most unhappy? Doing that because all of a sudden it became about chasing money and having the designer bag, and I felt like I wasn't woman enough and successful enough and proving all those things, and then what happened was women would get jealous of me.
Can I put a slightly different lens on that? You were desperately unhappy, I would argue, because it was all about you.
Yes.
And I would say in both, the thing that unites both femininity and masculinity is that they both thrive best in a position of service to each other.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah.
So I define masculinity as strength in service. Now, the strength is uniquely masculine. Not that women aren't strong, but men are stronger.
Yeah.
Right? It's,
Agreed.
fact. So strength in service, but the service is actually what makes it wholesome, healthy, and also fulfilling.
Yeah.
Right. And I would argue it's the same with femininity.
Yeah.
This whole girl boss, you can do everything. Yes, but you what you can't do is be happy while you're doing that.
Yeah. It's such extraordinary stress. And I talk about with Jay all the time. I look at a couple of my girlfriends now, and again, I'm going to be general because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I love my friends, but I was in that life literally a year ago. I know exactly how that feels.
Sure.
Where you're hypervigilant. You are a workaholic because, well, you've got all this free time. So why would you stop working?
And the silence is scary.
Yeah, it is. And then so you fill the void with things, and you're going to things, and you're seeing people you don't necessarily like because you're like, well, I've got to be out there. I've got to meet people. I've got to do the stuff. And you're on this hamster wheel. And then, you know, like, what is the answer to finding your person? Well, there is no answer. It happens when it happens. And no one likes to hear that. And I certainly did not like hearing that when I was single. But when you do meet that person, you get to a point you're like, I see why you were worth waiting for, right? And I would argue that a lot of women, and I'm talking again, like people are going to come for me in the comments, I think a lot of women get into relationships that are mediocre or subpar because they're like, you know what, this is better than nothing. Or, you know, I'm not saying settling, but they're like, I'll do this one until the better one comes along. And one of my girlfriends has literally said that. He's okay for now, but like I haven't met someone better yet.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you ever meet the other person if you're taking your time up over here with this one?
But also, who are you if you're the kind of person that is just going to have someone on
It's
hold?
a placeholder.
As a placeholder.
Seat warmer.
When that better person comes along, why in the world would they settle for you?
100%.
If that's who you are.
100%. And it was interesting because I was having this chat with one of my girlfriends a couple of days ago, And, you know, she wants children, and I understand that. So there's like, you know, the biological clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And I don't have that. I don't want children for myself. So I understand that need. But what I do see, and I've seen this with a girlfriend from a few years ago who was so desperate to get pregnant, she went to such weird, extraordinary lengths that I would say were unethical to try and fall pregnant via one night stands because she just wanted a baby and she just couldn't get a relationship. I understand that. And I'm not saying that that's, you know, like I'm not trying to take away from that. But I think a lot of where women are at, and I can only speak about women, I'm not a dude, right?
Sure.
I think, which one died?
That one. Quickly finish up. We've still got that.
Okay, we've got that. I'll finish. What I see is that a lot of, didn't I change that?
No, go. It was that was the card, yeah.
What I see is a lot of women who have been false promised. Like if you do the Carrie Bradshaw CEO girl boss thing, you will eventually get your Mr. Big. And did you ever watch Sex and the City?
I have managed to avoid seeing a single entire episode in my entire life.
So Mr. Big is the narcissistic guy who treats her like shit that Carrie is desperate to end up with and does inevitably end up with him.
Right.
And I would say that sets a very dangerous precedent because she had a good dude, Aiden, who was the nice guy that she could have had that very nice life with, but that wasn't good enough. She wanted the challenge and she wanted the money. And now apparently in the next season, this Aiden dude comes back, whatever. Anyway, my point is a lot of women have been told to expect this, but they themselves do not match that.
Yeah, correct.
You know, we talked about that before.
High value man wants a high value wife.
Well, yeah, and if he can demand that,
and I don't mean value in terms of money. I mean actually as a human being to spend time with someone that brings a lot of value into your life.
Why would they settle for you just because you're telling them that they're a bigot or a fat phobe if they don't?
That's right.
And what I see now is a lot of young women who are desperately disenfranchised, but they can't admit to themselves that maybe they've been sold a raw deal.
They've been lied to.
Yeah.
I actually have a lot of time and a lot of sympathy for women in that situation. I'm sorry, you've been lied to. And letting go of that lie is actually going to involve a lot of changing your own self-identity, and that's a very, very hard thing to do. And I get why women get bitter. I get why women get angry about this. You should be angry. It's not men's fault that you were lied to, though. Most of the people who lied to you were other women.
I agree. And I see that now, like, you know, in a happy relationship, one of my favorite things to do is cook Gareth dinner every day.
Yeah.
And not because he doesn't ask me. He can cook, he can do it all himself.
Yeah.
I want to do it.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And I enjoy him telling me this tastes amazing.
Yeah.
This is really good.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's that self-esteem coming from actual value.
Yeah.
You've brought value in a really tangible way and it's good. And you therefore, your own satisfaction with your own life, your happiness, it's that masculine strength in service, the feminine softness in service, I would actually argue is the feminine.
Yeah. And what I've realized as someone who's been an entrepreneur her whole life and trying to do it solo, now having being part of a team, he is literally, you know, the other part that I didn't have, which is someone who, like, I'm all pie in the sky creative and he's much more grounded and earthy and like, let's think this through, let's do it methodically, you know, and now it's like, it's us together being able to build something as opposed to like, I can do it all myself. I don't need no man. Well, can I tell you, you do. It's very helpful.
Well, also the other thing that we need is to finish.
Yes,
yeah,
we do.
Because we've lost one camera already. We're
Well,
surviving
it's
on
only your
two.
camera.
So,
Did we do a better episode today?
This has been fun, actually. I feel like we've laughed a little bit more.
We have laughed a lot, and we sparred.
We did a little bit, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we fenced.
We should disagree more often. Tell us what we should argue about next time.
Yes, and if you're not already, please follow the Oddcast HQ on YouTube.
Go to our actual Oddcast HQ dedicated YouTube channel. That's the home of the podcast of the Oddcast going forward. Go there, subscribe, turn on the notifications.
Yes, and we will have some more developments, but we'll have new videos next week.
New gear. So we're going to have different cameras. We're going to have a new desk. We're going to be experimenting, and a whole bunch of new things can go wrong.
Excellent. So basically, it's just forever a work in progress.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, guys, on that note, we will see you in the next one, and follow us, do all the things, all the YouTubey things. Subscribe, like, comment, follow him, follow me.
Yeah.
It's all in the notes.
Yeah.
See ya.
See ya.